switching guys in and out of the lineup obviously isn't an option right now. But the players themselves and the group in the room, if they play to their potential, will win hockey games, you know, and it's being consistent from day to day to be able to do that.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That voice you just heard was Drew Bannister talking about the St. Louis Blues and how they responded in that 8-1 loss the other night. Alex, they're trying to get back on track after one of the worst losses that we've seen by the Blues in recent memory, which is saying something considering the fact that this is a team that's had some really bad seasons recently. I want to see what they look like against the Bruins tonight, man. We've seen this before. They have found a way to respond to really bad losses. Last time that they lost 8-1, don't have to go back that far, a couple of weeks ago, they responded pretty well the following game against Philadelphia. Now, they lost the game. My guy Jordan Kyrou with a really bad turnover at the end of that one. Sound familiar?
I didn't have to say names.
Feels like we've been watching reruns recently. Yeah. But anyways, so let's set that aside for a moment. They responded pretty well, and then they have that really good game against Toronto when they get back home. We've seen some positive responses from the Blues this year. I want to see more than just one game, though. This will be the start of whatever the response is to that embarrassing performance from Saturday night. What are you looking for most in this game, Alex? What's the key that you're going to be looking into?
It's probably going to be their response in the first period, because not only has this team trailed in 13 of 15 games, but it's been 7 consecutive games that they've given up the first goal to the opposition. Like, you talk about slow starts. Now, it's a narrative of this team that it's like, oh yeah, they gave up the first goal, but they'll come back because that's typically what they do.
And it's typically like the first minute, which is odd. The last 2 games I've missed like the first seconds. 2 minutes, and I turn on the game and it's 1-0 somehow.
It was 18 seconds and then 59 seconds. So honestly, in terms of this game, in terms of this game, it's the first period. Because, like, you can say all you want and calling out the effort and making sure that guys respond. What do you look like in the first period? Because if Boston comes out, wins a faceoff, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're down by a goal 30 seconds in, you obviously didn't learn anything. But I don't really care about this Bruins game, to be honest with you. Like I do, it's important to not get blown out. But if you lose this game like the Philadelphia Flyers, so be it. You responded. You played a better game. It was a loss. It sucks. I'm more concerned what this team does in terms of stringing games together. You have had 3 opportunities to take a 3-game win streak, and you've failed every single one of them. At some point...
You got some really obnoxious and annoying stats in this segment, Alex. That's my job here.
Sorry, everybody.
Know your lane, man.
Apparently, I just take that one over. But, I mean, like, you had the Seattle-San Jose game, you lost to Vegas. You had the Islanders-Hurricanes game, you lost to the Winnipeg Jets. You've had chances to string wins together. And remember, that was something this Blues team couldn't do last year either. I think it was a 3-game win streak last season that they couldn't put together. So beyond this Boston game, what do you look like against Buffalo? What do you look like against the same Boston team that you'll play 4 days later after you see them tonight? And then even bigger picture, who cares about the Eastern Conference? You're 2-4 against the West and 0-4 against the Central Division. Start picking up some wins in those categories. So this Bruins game kind of feels like, yeah, I want to see you play well, but I'm going to finish the Bruins game by going to the next one and seeing what you look like on that one.
Yeah, I think for me, it's start with tonight. It comes down to the fast start. Well, I want to turn the game on, and if I miss the first minute, not see a breadstick on the board already. It comes down to the fast start for the game against the Bruins. Now, for me, I'm looking not even just 3 games of, can they string together a 3-game winning streak? I want to see this team play solid hockey for like a 2-3 week stretch. And the reason I say that is, hey, when you get blown out like this, teams end up responding the next night, right? They end up maybe responding for 2 or 3 games. The question is, are you going to revert back to your old self? You know, when you do something wrong at work, if like BK yells at me for not playing a clip of audio.
He does yell a lot.
Like if he would do that, the next day I'm going to be on my game.
Now, time
But the question is, am I going to revert back to myself a week later and not play the audio, not have it ready?
To be fair, you're never on your game.
Challenge flag.
No,
People are going to hear that and assume that happened recently.
Oh, yeah.
That didn't happen, as far as I'm aware of, at least.
I mean,
I was just using an example, everybody.
It wouldn't surprise people if it happened last week.
That's why I wanted to clarify that it didn't. No, because it would surprise nobody if I was a dictator on this show.
Well, we all know that is true. You call yourself our fearless leader. Nobody else calls you that in this room.
That works nowadays. All right, so I do want to say for this team in this game, my biggest thing, Alex, I just want to see him compete. It sounds so simple, and so much of my analysis of this team this year is going to be simple because I'm not viewing this as like an all-in season. I'm not looking at them to try to get to the Stanley Cup final, anything like that, right? I just want to see them go out there and build the culture that is going to be established over the next 3 to 5 years while they're in their winning window. And part of building that culture is responding to terrible games like what you saw on Saturday night and being able to see, okay, Braden Shen held a few guys accountable. Hey, Justin Falk, when he said that was unacceptable, guys heard that and listened to it. Drew Bannister, after the game, said, right now, taking guys out of the lineup, not really an option for us right now because of all of the injuries that they're dealing with. So instead of going in there and doing something like that, like we saw him do last year, juggle the lines up a bit, figure out what the best way is to put them in places to succeed, and let's go see it happen. Like, those are the kinds of things that you can watch in a game like this. Also, Boston is no great shakes this year, man. They're not terrible, but they're also not a team that's this world beater as they've been in recent seasons. But you know one thing about them, they're going to fight. They're going to go out there and they're going to play a disciplined game of hockey. Can the Blues do that for 60 minutes? Not just 2 periods of it like we've seen for the majority of the season. Can you go out there and just play your game for 60? And even if you lose while doing that, because you're without your number 1 defenseman and your number 1 center, I can live with it. That's why I've enjoyed watching the team for most of the season this year, is because I just feel like you're getting a better effort every single night. I can see, okay, the capacity of what they have in them, their top performance is like an 80 overall on NHL The Show. But they're getting like 78 regularly. I can live with that. I'm fine with that. They're not going to be the Edmonton Oilers of Wayne Gretzky's era, right? Like, that's not in the range of outcomes for this team. But can you be solid? I want to see that tonight. And then consistently moving forward, I want to see it. But especially tonight after a game like that.
I think if you're a fan and you're isolating individual games of what you're watching, you need to pick apart what the problems have been this season for the Blues. Turnovers, specifically one player. We won't name him, right, BK?
Brandon.
It's the first period. How you look in that, can you finally stop the snowball from going downhill where you keep giving up the first goal against the opponent? Can you score first and then pile on with that? Zone entries. Can you start making it more difficult for the opposition to enter your zone? And
then make it less difficult for you to enter the zone. You do those two things, we're feeling good. That neutral zone has been a triangle for the Blues this year.
That's some expert breakdown there by BK, because you score more goals, you get into the zone. That's how you win hockey games.
Alex, I have an idea for this Blues team.
Okay, please.
I don't think Drew Bannister thought of this.
Oh, okay.
Get into the zone.
Okay.
Don't let the other team get into your zone.
Holy bleep.
And shoot.
Oh, shoot, yeah. That's a good point. He probably hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Especially on the power play.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, the power play is going to be one of those other areas they're going to have to figure out. But I'm going to start isolating certain areas if I'm watching this team, rather than just focus on, they won against the Boston Bruins, or, oh my gosh, you lost 3-1. How do you look at other elements of the game? Are you building towards something rather than falling into the same snake pit that you typically do?
There is a return to the ice tonight that we're going to be able to see. One of my favorite players that we've been able to watch so far this year. Nope, definitely not. Not even close. Matthew Joseph is, though. He's back on the ice today. It's expected that he is going to make his return to the lineup. I mentioned when he went down, I think we were underestimating the effect that could potentially have on the Blues when he went down with his injury, because he does all of the dirty work. Anything you could possibly want somebody, they're dissimilar as players, similar in terms of the role that they had for the Blues. So let me make that clear before I say this. Kind of Jaden Schwartzy, and that he's just going to go be they used to call Jaden Schwartz the worker bee, where he'd just go do all the stuff that nobody else wants to do, go into the dirty areas, go into the board battles, all of that, win the puck, be tough on, all of that stuff, the cliches that you hear coaches say. That was Matthew Joseph to a T. And then he went down, and it stopped happening on his line. So I will be curious to see what kind of an effect he has when he's back on the ice. He brings energy. He is a guy that works in the tough areas. So that is something that I'm going to be honing in on tonight as well.
It's a really
that Joseph has on the lineup.
It's a good impact to have him return. The question is, what's he going to be? Because obviously he's not going to be at full speed like he was at the beginning of the season. But here's the element that I really think he's going to benefit this team, and what you saw happen against you with the Washington Capitals and the Utah Hockey Club. When you get down, that bench gets down. That Washington Capitals game was a perfect example of, we're not going to beat Logan Thompson in the third period, and then the game got away from you. What was working for this team was a very vocal and active bench, even when you were trailing. That's why you saw those comebacks. And I personally believe Matthew Joseph is one of the biggest components of that. Like, you've got a guy who's on the bench, always talking, letting people realize that, look, you are still in this hockey game. And when he steps over the boards, he backs it up. And now you finally get another line back because you've lost one of your lines with Matthew Joseph. Now you can put Holloway and Joseph on a line with Shen. It was working prior to the injury. Hopefully it can carry over where it was before he was injured.
Yeah, lines from practice today. Neighbors, Booch, and Kyrou is your top line. Okay. Holloway, Shin, and Joseph is your second line. Then Torpo, Foxa with Walker, and Saad, Sonny, and Texier is your fourth line going into the game tonight. I mean, they've jumbled these things up to... Yeah.
I think it's pretty telling that your fourth line is Sundqvist, Saad, and Texier. It tells you where the offense is at right now. Foxa, Walker, Toropchenko is more of an offensive line for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely deserved.
It's deserved. I don't know how you use that fourth line as currently constructed. Like, I don't...
Saad's going to go out there and set the tone.
Not exactly sure what the role is for that line, but...
Well, the role is Sonny, win the faceoff, dump it in, somebody go get the puck.
Good luck. I do think those middle two lines, though, have a clear identity for you.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it tells you exactly what they're trying to accomplish tonight. They're going to set the tone. Holloway, Shin, and Joseph is a working line. Torpo, Foxa, Walker, same thing. I think this is clear. What they're doing, Alex, is, I mean, you heard him say it publicly. Drew Bannister said, right now, benching guys is not an option for us, given where we're at with our health. What they can do is limit time on the ice. And if you're on the fourth line, you get less time, right? Mm-hmm. So, hey, Saad and Texier, it's pretty clear who's being called out here. Bolduc is a healthy scratch again, whatever.
That makes sense.
Saad and Texier, pick your game up, boys.
Yep.
It's time to go. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, hey, Bolduc's back into the lineup. That's the way that this is going to operate for the foreseeable future. So I think it's pretty clear what Bannister is trying to get across with his message when you look at the way that the lineup is constructed right now, because I wouldn't have assumed, based on where we were on opening night, Torpo, Fox, and Walker would be your third line at any point this season. It's not a qualified third line, but given where the Blues are at, it makes sense. It's, in my opinion, the right way to go about it. All right. He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Blues versus the Bruins tonight. Pre-game coverage with Alex starting at 6 o'clock. I'll be in the arena tonight, so expect a weird one at Enterprise Center.
Can you get a rain delay for a hockey game?
They will find a way.
There's going to be electric that goes out or something.
T-Bone, how many Cardinals games do you think we've been to over the last 3 years together?
Probably like 15 to 20 would be my guess.
Feels right. How many of them have been normal, like nothing weird happened in them games? Like
I don't think a single game. No, I don't think it's
exclusively avoid going with BK because of that reason.
I have not been to a game with BK where something weird has not happened.
If you're betting on the game tonight, bet on something wild to happen. Like, just get crazy with it. Put a few bucks over on the Circus Sports app in the state of Illinois.
Bennington goal.
Yeah, sure. Like something weird like that. A goal within the first minute. Like any of that kind of, I guess that's
Boston
not even
to
weird
reach
for the
10
Blues
goals.
anymore.
That's how you set a tone. Bennington just takes the puck and skates it up the ice
Bennington
himself.
fight tonight.
We're going like, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Goalie fight?
Trent Frederick versus Jordan Bennington. That'll get the crowd going.
I'm here for it.
That would be awesome.
But then BK will be like,
oh, Bennington's up to his antics again. Oh, God, he's doing it again.
It's different when I'm in the arena for it. Blues versus Bruins tonight, starting at 6 o'clock pregame with Alex. Puck drop tonight at 7, right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll talk to our guy, Jeremy Rutherford, Blues insider for The Athletic. We're going to be talking to Jamie Langenbrunner coming up at 12:30. Former Blues forward, now an assistant general manager with the Bruins. He was here in that like 2011, 2012 range for the Blues as they started to get back on track. He was one of the players that Doug Armstrong has referenced in regards to the Blues bringing in some veterans to set that culture again. So we'll talk to him about that process coming up at 12:30. But next, once again, the National League awards were announced yesterday in terms of the finalists for the awards. And Alex, there was one guy who has been in this award basically every time he's been a manager. Is he the one that's got away for the Cardinals? Talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. It is time to unlock your inner champion. The place to do so is Victory Men's Health. It is a super easy process to book that first appointment with them. Go to their website, victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. And when you get there, upper right-hand corner, click Book Now, put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN told you about them, and then tell them what you are looking for, whether that's help with some weight loss that you've been gaining over the course of the year. Maybe you want to get started a little bit early on those January 1st New Year's resolutions. They can help you out at Victory Men's Health. Low testosterone, maybe you don't feel quite the same when you wake up in the morning, don't have the same energy levels, you're not getting as much out of your workouts. Could be signs of low testosterone or erectile dysfunction. That can help you out with that over at Victory Men's Health as well. So check them out today. They've got 4 great locations across the St. Louis area. They will help you out at each and every one of them. And check them online at victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. With Alex and T-Bone on BKJ are going to join us in about 10 minutes or so. Alex, when you think about the one that got away for the Cardinals,
There's not one, man.
where does Mike Shildt rank? 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. The reason I'm asking is because yesterday, the National League Manager of the Year award, the 3 finalists were announced. Mike Shildt, of course, because he was a manager for a full season, was among them. There's only been one season in which he was the manager for the year when he was not nominated, and it was the shortened COVID season in 2020, where you could make an argument he should have been among them, considering the fact that the Cardinals, despite having the lockdown situation, ended up still finding a way to make the postseason that year with him at the helm. So for you, when you think about it, where does he rank for you?
He would be in the top 3. I mean, you could pretty much pick apart wherever you want. Like I'm sure a lot of people would say Sandy Alcantara, Zach Gallen, when you see how they operate, Randy Arozarena right now. God, there's a lot of them. Mike Shildt would probably be 2 or 3 for me. And here's why. He was willing to push back against the organization when you knew there were issues beyond the major league level. Like we don't know what the philosophical differences are. We can kind of speculate what the philosophical differences are. But Mike Shildt made it pretty clear that some of the decisions around the Cardinals in terms of their minor league approach, instructors that weren't with the team, how things were developing in A-ball, AA, and AAA.
And let's be very clear here. It's been reported. He pushed back on the idea that Chris Carpenter not a part of their organization any longer. He ended up with the Angels. COVID, they cut back on a bunch of those positions. And then after COVID, it was expected that they would hire a bunch of people back. They didn't, never filled those positions, and now they're starting to do that again. That was something Mike Shildt pushed back against.
This is a guy that went through rookie ball all the way up to AAA and won a championship with the Memphis Redbirds. So this was a guy that saw what was coming for the Cardinals in terms of their development, the process that they've gotten away from, and trying to push them back into it. And the philosophical differences went the opposite direction, and Mike Shildt now has gone on to have success. He's going to be up there because you had somebody in the organization that understood the underlying doings of the Cardinals organization, and they got away from it, and the Cardinals like, nope, we're doing this our way, and they moved on from it. So who knows what his career is going to look like, but this is going to be one that I feel like Mo's going to look back at the end of his career and be like, man, what would have happened if you would have kept Mike Shildt?
Yeah, I think he's probably top 5 on my list, and like at number 5, I guess is where I would have him. And it's more so because I just don't view the effect of the manager as much as playing into like, hey, imagine if Arozarena was roaming the outfield, you know? Like I I think the reason he's a part of this Manager of the Year in the as a finalist is because he had a great roster around him. And don't get me wrong, I think he did some good managerial decisions this year. I thought he hurt his team in the series against the against the Dodgers. But I think the reason that he's going to be one that you look back on is the one that gets away is because of what you just said, of sounding the alarm bells early on of, hey, why are we not bringing back these instructors? Why are we letting them go here? And because of COVID, well, why aren't we bringing them back when that is over and everything gets back to the normal? Because, the reason I don't look at it as being in, the top 3 or, number 1 on that list is because, he would not have had success in 2023. Why did he have success in 2024 with the San Diego Padres? Well, because A.J. Preller built a really good roster around him. Would he have had success here in 2023 or, honestly, this past year with the Cardinals? No, because it wasn't a good roster, that's why he's a little bit lower, but he still belongs in the top 5, in my opinion, of the ones that got away.
I would have Randy Arozarena at number 1. We all agree with that?
Yeah.
I would have Sandy Alcantara at number 2.
Yeah.
I would have Zach Gallen at number 3.
Yeah.
Tell me if you guys think this is unfair. I'd have Bryce Harper at number 4.
Well, I would say you can't get away when you never had a chance.
Yeah, but I could hear the argument.
They should have gone after him. He should have been a Cardinal. They decided not to because of philosophical differences there with me in terms of the idea of a 10-plus year contract. But whatever. Set that one aside. It's just kind of tongue-in-cheek. Jose Quintana, I think I would have up there.
See, I'd have Montgomery up there ahead of him.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I'd have Quintana above him because the contract was never going to be significant. And they decided not to bring him back because they didn't have money in the coffers, and apparently they needed to give a $17 million contract to Adam Wainwright to pay him back for all of the good things that he had done for his previous
and it's great
years.
Music.
The Cardinals stuck with him. Whatever. I would have Jose Quintana up there as well. And then I would have Mike Shildt. And it's because of all the reasons, as you just said, T-Bone. I don't think Shildt fixes a lot of the problems that were here. I think Shildt was a symptom, not the root cause. The idea of firing Mike Shildt, it just went along with all of the other things that have gone awry for them over the last 6 years, probably, I think you can say. And I think when they fired him, we will never know the full explanation as to why. It's never going to happen. They're never going to say it publicly. But we do know some of the things that were going on behind the scenes. Very few of them. I'm sure it's a lot more than what we know publicly, but the stuff about him pushing back on their minor league system and them not hiring these roving instructors and all of that stuff, that's real. And it's stuff that they are now acknowledging, finally, for the first time. And it's been 3 years since they had this back and forth with Mike Shildt. Hey, what could have changed over the last 3 years? How would the development have looked a little different for Nolan Gorman or for Jordan Walker or Victor Scott?
Or some of the pitchers in your minor league system.
No doubt. Would you be producing more of those fully formed players to the major league level if, even if you had fired Mike Shildt, but you listened to some of his critiques at the time and took them to heart and said, you know what, he's got some fair points here. Maybe we should start to invest more in our minor league system. If you had listened to that, would things look different? We'll never know. But I think it's fair to wonder. So I would have him on the list, but probably not as high as many would, because I think 2023 was always coming. It was always around the corner because of many of the critiques that Mike Shildt had previously acknowledged.
Yeah, and the only reason I put him up higher is, and all of this is speculation, hindsight, whatever you would go with, but you wonder if 2023 would have been as bad if Mike Shildt had a bigger say in terms of what the minor league system was going about. Because maybe you avoid some of the players that were unavailable to you in terms of the depth when you absolutely needed some things, because just looking through what Mike Shildt was a part of, and look, it's the manager, there's a lot more that goes into it, but he's a large voice in terms of the minor league when you're the manager of AA and AAA, but you look at some of the pitchers in AA and AAA when Mike Shildt was there, there's a lot of guys that contributed to the major league level. Does he continue to have that pipeline stronger than what it was by 2023 when you moved on from those decisions?
And the reason I'm a little bit lower on that side, though I do think there is a fair question to be asked about it. They're doing this minor league kind of reset right now, right? I don't think that, because that would have been, 2021 when he kind of starts to sound the alarms of the minor league system, and then he ultimately ends up getting fired. I don't think that suddenly turns around in a 2-year span. I don't think 2023 is avoidable. I think the Cardinals were always in line for the ship to sink in 2023.
Yeah.
I don't think if he comes out and they end up listening to him at heart, I think this minor league reset takes like 3 to 5 years. And that's why I just don't think, even if the Cardinals listen in 2021, they avoid 2023. They avoid the pitfalls of not having pitching to where they have to go out and make all the moves that they did.
But if he was your manager or he was a part of your team in 2018, Mike Matheny was fired and Mike Shildt was there, if you're willing to listen to him a little bit longer, maybe you can at least slow play what 2023 looked like.
I think that would help you more in 2025 and 2026 than it would have in 2022, 2023. Because those changes that they're making now, you're not really going to feel that for the next few years. What I mean by that is the guys that are most going to be able to benefit from the changes that they're making in their system are probably 18, 19, 20 years old down in high A ball.
Or kids that aren't even in the system.
Exactly, that are going all the way through. Like J.J. Weatherholt is probably going to be the first prime example of what the new process looks like going through the Cardinal system. And I don't anticipate seeing J.J. Weatherholt at any point next year, and probably not until at the earliest, like late 2026. So it's going to be a while before we really feel these changes. All right, couple of texts here. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Somebody said, guys, are you forgetting about Adolis Garcia? I'm not. I don't consider to be Adolis Garcia in the same category as these other guys. And the reason why is because Adolis Garcia went to the Rangers. So his career was effectively done here in St. Louis in 2018. In 2019, he ends up with like 3 games for the Texas Rangers, goes through waivers, is taken off of their 40-man roster heading into, I believe, the 2021 season, has a really solid year for them, but strikes out 195 times, ends up with a exactly league average OPS, and was not a very good overall player for the Rangers in 2021. And that was a bad Rangers team. That's why he got all the playing time that he did. He took that, learned from it, got better, and then over the next couple of seasons was a really effective, solid outfielder for them. And then this past season was bad again. So I do not put him into the same category as some of these other guys. Like, he's not on the level with Randy A. He's not a Zach Gallen. He's not Sandy Alcantara. I don't even put him up there with like a Jose Quintana. I don't view that as a one that got away. That's a reflection of where you were with your system at the time. You had better dudes, and he ended up needing more time in another team system. Every team could have had him. Every team missed on him.
If the Rangers hadn't put him on waivers or waived him, I think he probably falls into this conversation. But
Certainly.
But because he got basically was told in Texas, you don't belong on our 40-man, and every team had a chance to reclaim him, and they didn't. That's why he doesn't fit the list for me. I think Tommy Edman's on the list ahead of him, and like that's super early on in the Tommy Edman experience. But why did they get rid of Tommy Edman? It wasn't to acquire Fedde and Pham. Let's call it what it was. It was a cost-cutting measure, essentially. They couldn't bring in more money on their roster because of the RSN situation, which was unresolved. So they were forced to trade a Tommy Edman to try and improve the big league club. And what they do, they end up getting rid of one of those 2 guys.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, we're either doing NFL quick hitters or talking to Jeremy Rutherford. Depends on his schedule. We'll do that next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friend and insurance agent, Tracy Bibb, who is always out looking for you, taking care of your home and your car insurance, and making sure that she is saving you a little bit of money. Always searching for the most competitive rates when it comes to your coverage and keeping you in the loop. And this is the part that I find so important when it comes to your insurance agent, having that personal relationship. So when there's an issue, you give her a call, you mention it to her, she's able to help you right away. I've mentioned in the past my shed that had a tree trunk fallen in about 6 months ago, big hole in the roof, called Tracy, found out what we needed to do to take care of that shed and got that resolved over a weekend. So call Tracy today, tell her you heard me talk about it on 101 ESPN, and she will walk you through the entire process of switching over to the Bibb agency. Free, non-committal quote, super simple, 314-328-4260. Again, that's 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Boston Bruins. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for puck drop at 7. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by Jeremy Rutherford. He's the Blues insider for The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at JP Rutherford. He had a great piece over the weekend on an unacceptable performance by the St. Louis Blues, which he called one of the worst efforts that he has seen. In fact, the single worst effort that he has seen in 20 years covering the team. JR joins us now on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate the time as always, man. Why, in your mind, I mean, you've seen at this point thousands of Blues hockey games. Why did that one stand out as the single worst effort in your mind, JR?
It was just clear that they weren't trying. It was just absolutely clear. And there have been obviously hundreds of poor performances over the years, you know, going back to when I started covering the team, 2005, 2006. You had some good teams during these last 20 years. You had teams that overachieved. But you have a team that's built this year. They want to get in the playoffs. They want to be competitive. We've seen that competitive fire from them at times this year with all these comebacks. I go back to the San Jose game, incredible competitive fire in this team. And this particular night, 3-1 game, BK, going into the third period, you're still in that game. And once Washington started to, turn it up a notch, the Blues just, basically took their uniforms off and went home. So to me, as I said, that was one of the worst I've seen in 20 years.
So, Jerry, you've been in the locker room for that post-game, and then on Monday, and then today. Everybody is going to say the right things following an ugly loss like that. What do you look for in this game tonight against Boston to tell you that they're a different team, or is there anything that can tell you that tonight?
Yeah, that's the thing. You hear what they say in the locker room after a lot of games, and I know the fans get tired of it too, kind of regurgitated lines. My comment is always, what do you expect them to say? They're not going to come out and lay it on a platter for you in terms of what's going wrong, whether it be on the ice or behind the scenes. But they're going to tell you what they're going to tell you, and it's going to be the same spiel just about every time. I thought Justin Falk was pretty honest the other night. Braden Shen, does a good job with that stuff too. They're just not going to give you the goods. And so what I've seen the past couple of days, Alex, is a team that looks like it's listening. And I know that sounds like, well, yeah, they're NHL players, and they've got to get this figured out. It's still early in the season. They're not getting these injured guys back for a while. But I saw, we can't hear what they're saying on the ice, but there's a lot of instruction by Drew Bannister, Steve Ott, Claude Julien, Mike Weber, so on and so forth. And I saw players listen intently and trying to go over things with the coaches during the practices. And, one thing I'm writing about, and it could be up at the Athletic here in a couple hours, things like these line changes. We saw in Philly and Tampa, they were just great. You get in the offensive zone, you got the team hemmed in a little bit, get a guy out there, Nathan Walker scores. Tampa game, Sundqvist gets on the ice after a quick change, and he scores. There are things that have made the Blues successful in the past couple of weeks against good teams. They did not do that against Washington. Bad line changes, among some other details. Those are the things that they've been trying to clean up these past couple days.
JR, is that coaching? Is that a player thing? Like, what do you credit that to?
I think it can be a combination of both, but in these instances, and I broke down video last night. I just chatted with Drew Bannister for about 10 minutes about some of these line changes that I've watched the last 24 hours, and Drew Bannister wasn't putting it on the players, but I'll put it on the players. I mean, there are situations where, two guys are going after the same player to defend the play, and another player has to recognize that and not make a change. Or if the puck's going back the other way, like Washington had the puck, had the possession in the neutral zone, they're literally driving up the ice, going the other way, and you got guys changing. Like, the coaches don't want that. The coaches aren't instructing them to do that, but yet you have players doing it. So, I put it, what I saw the other night, on the players.
The wild part about that, just to add on to it, JR, because I was thinking about this in the game Saturday for how bad the line changes were and how it impacted the Blues, giving up 2 separate goals. They have not had a bench minor yet this season. They're one of 3 teams to not have a too many men on the ice penalty, to where last year I think they had 9 or 10 of them.
Yeah, and they it seemed like it used to be a common theme, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's a good trend that they don't have it this year. But I guess what my response would be is that even no bench minors for too many men, doesn't paint the picture accurately. Because for anybody, if you have a chance to go look at these videos here after I post them, I mean, you'll see what we're talking about here in terms of just bad decision making to make the change. So yeah, they're not throwing 6 guys on the ice at once, but the 5 guys that are out there and that are changing aren't doing it at the right time.
Jeremy Rutherford is our guest here on 101 ESPN. He joins us each and every Tuesday on BK and Ferrario. You can follow him on Twitter at JP Rutherford. And if you do so, you'll see his line combinations that he tweeted out from Morning Skate today. Neighbors, Booch, Kyrou, Holloway, Shin, and Joseph. That's what I wanted to ask you about, JR, is Matthew Joseph making his return to the lineup. I feel like it's almost gone a little under the radar that he was out for as long as he was, because you had Robert Thomas who got hurt, and then you had Broberg who got hurt, arguably your best forward, your best defenseman. That's going to be difficult to overcome. What does Matthew Joseph add to the lineup when he's in there, in your opinion?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It has gone under the radar. When you lose Thomas and you lose Broberg, the focus, the headlines, that's what people are going to focus on. But Matthew Joseph, I thought, had played phenomenally leading up to the injury, lower body injury in Montreal. It didn't look like it was going to be serious at the get-go, but he did wear a boot during the past couple weeks and missed 6 games. So he's back tonight. And what did they miss? To me, they missed some tenacity. They certainly missed some speed. I go back, if you can watch one video of Matthew Joseph this year, it's in Toronto when he gets back on the back check, steals the puck, and sends it the other way. I mean, that's just phenomenal on all ends. I think he's been a great pickup, great addition by Doug Armstrong and his staff. I think if you can keep a player like this, he's a great third-line player who really just brings everything to that line, and we saw the success of that line before he went out. So good thing to get him back tonight for the Blues.
Jared, final one from me, and we've heard Drew Bannister talk about accountability in the past. Are we seeing some of the accountability factor in this tonight in terms of Saad and Texier being on the fourth line and Zach Bolduc being a healthy scratch?
Yeah, I think so. I think Drew Bannister and the staff, they just have no choice but to operate that way. They have to hold guys accountable like they did last year, with the Buchneviches, Thomases, Kyrou, so on and so forth. So, if a guy hasn't played up to snuff, then you're going to see these types of changes. Because to me, I've told you guys this in the past couple months, to me it's about the big picture. How is this guy developing? Who's developing at a faster rate? Reward those players. So, yes, they had a conversation with Texier. They see some things that they don't like in his game. Healthy scratch the other night. He gets back in the lineup. That's the one thing that coaches and these staffs have to do is once you talk to these players, give them an opportunity to get back in and show you differently. And I'm sure Bolduc could get that chance, but Texier gets it tonight.
Out of curiosity, JR, we'll get you out of here on this. What do you think of the way that they've approached Bolduc so far this year?
Well, I'm sure people could make some points on both sides, but the side that I'll take is that they've given him opportunity. I know he had a great camp, and I think he deserved a chance to be here on opening night. But I've seen situations like that, BK, where he makes the team, and then you're scratched half the time. And so I think the fact that they've let him play, they've let him make some mistakes, they've talked to him about some things. Look, in doing this line change story that I'm working on, Bolduc's had some long shifts, some of the longer shifts on the team, and that's something they're trying to fix. So, they're talking to him behind the scenes. They're working with him. I think this is going to be a good player in the long run. But to answer your question, the fact that he's here playing NHL games and getting a chance to work himself back in, when they do sit him, I think is something that the Blues have to do with him. You can't just continue to throw him out there night in and night out if he's not doing some of the things that you need from him.
Jeremy Rutherford does great work over at The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at JP Rutherford, and he joins us each and every Tuesday here on BK and Ferrario. JR, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll talk with you again next week.
Yep, really appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
You got it. That's Jeremy Rutherford joining us as he does each and every week here on 101 ESPN. Appreciate his time as always. Blues back in action tonight against the Bruins. Pregame coverage beginning at 6 o'clock. Alex, you said you saw something from a podcast recently about the other side of this game. Blues obviously coming under fire for their recent performance against the Washington Capitals, a game in which they lost 8-1. But I mentioned Boston not exactly having a great season either. What's going on with their coaching situation?
So they're a 500 team right now as well. Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast yesterday, which I must have missed when I was listening through. This is what he had to say. He's heard chatter that has started around teams possibly looking at Joel Quenneville or Todd McClellan as candidates for a coaching change. Friedman on the Bruins, quote, I think even if Boston made a change, I think a guy like Jim Montgomery would be a candidate in some other places. And he referenced, he's like, I could see a team like a Nashville that says, well, it's not working. Let's go get another coach after firing an Andrew Brunette. But you're a Boston team that Brad Marchand's a free agent after this year. You just locked up your goaltender and your forward in David Pastrnak. You've got some young players on the defensive side. You're a 500 team right now. So if they don't fix this, and boy, the Blues play them twice in the next 4 days. If they don't fix this, you could see Jim Montgomery potentially being on the outs and then bringing somebody else in to try and light a fire for that Boston Bruins team.
I think the way that hockey coaches are discarded in the NHL is just insane, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. And I get it. You got to change something. Like, what you're doing is not working. You can't really change out the players. So what do? Well, you change out the coach. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about with Craig Berube at the time, the biggest thing for a coach is, hey, can you motivate these guys? Because schematically, there's only so many things that you can do in hockey. Hockey is about my understanding of it at least, and I'm sure that there will be some that disagree with this, but hockey is about as much like reaction as it is like dictating the way that the game is going to be played, because at all times you're reacting to something that happens very fast on the ice. And so it is a very player-driven sport as opposed to like football, where it is very schematic, right? I am going to do this, which makes the defense react in this way, and it all kind of changes. I think that leads itself to what we're seeing. Like Jim Montgomery over the last 2 seasons had the best points percentage in the NHL.
Yeah.
And now this is a guy that we're just like throwing out to pasture. It's crazy,
and you know
man.
why Jim Montgomery's coming under fire in Boston? It's because their offense has taken a step back, and it's the same thing with Craig Berube and Jordan Kyrou from last year or 2 years ago, to where there was video of Jim Montgomery just chewing out Brad Marchand and sitting him in the third period of a game. He sat David Pasternak in a game. The difference with Berube and Kyrou versus the Boston with Montgomery and those players is those guys are fan favorites, and those guys are stars. And so if your coach is chewing those guys out, not putting them on the ice, you're going to look at the coach and say, well, what's going on here?
The thing is, though, if he wasn't doing that and those guys weren't playing at their best, then the fans are saying, well, why isn't he holding the guys accountable?
Yeah.
Guys aren't being held accountable. That's why they're going off and doing it. It's the whole song and dance that we do.
And they overlooked the fact that Brad Marchand was like, after that game where he was chewed out and sat on the bench, he was like, I don't know why people are making a big deal of this. He's like, I need to be chewed out at times. Sure. And he's played better as of late.
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's time to download the Circus Sports app in the state of Illinois. If you haven't, then you're not winning the most money you possibly can on your sports betting needs. So download it today, and when you do, you're going to win the most money possible. Alex and I, this is the place that we bet on. I like this weekend an SEC three-leg parlay, Alex. Texas minus 13.5 against Arkansas. Tennessee plus the 9.5 points, going back to the well against Georgia, just basically shorting the Georgia stock. I like Tennessee in that one, plus the 9.5 points. And then we saw Mizzou last week. That game was heading to a heavy under, and then the final 3 minutes happened, and it looks like it was some kind of a shootout. I don't expect that this week. Under 44.5 for Mizzou versus South Carolina. $10 bet wins you $60 over on the Circa Sports app in Illinois.
Well, you know, since there's a Blues game, I'm going to throw a little parlay for you as well. If BK gave you the football one, I'm saying Blues on money line. Jake Neighbors scores a goal. If you do that on any other sports book, you bring in $50 if you bet 10. If you do it on Circa, you bring in 65. Download the app today for all of your sports betting needs at Circa Sports, Illinois. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Three one 4399964 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 636. Guys, do you think Miami FC losing their first round playoff game was one of the bigger upsets that we've seen in North American sports? T-Bone, I asked you about this the other day because I saw a video about it. How does this happen?
Don't they have the best player in the world on their team?
Like 5 of them in the league. If you're just looking at the best players in the league, how does Miami lose in the first round? MLS has to be furious.
Oh, I'm
they
sure
should
they
have fixed
are.
this match. Like, I can't say that
were
publicly.
supposed
They
to
should have fixed this
carry
match.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell happened to Miami. I think defensively at times they weren't as sound this year as they needed to be. You know, when you spend a lot of money on Lionel Messi, you kind of forget about some of the other issues that you might have. But yeah, I mean, this is the worst case scenario for the MLS. He's brought in to be the guy that, you know, helps propel the sport forward. And how do you do that? It's the playoffs. You know, see him raise the MLS championship, and he's not going to be doing that. He's going to be instead chilling in Miami on a beach somewhere.
I don't think he's going to be in Miami.
Yeah. I think
he's going home?
Yeah, I think he's going to go home.
Elsewhere. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Do you guys think that the Cardinals would be willing to eat money to increase trade values this offseason? For example, would Nolan Arenado actually have good value on a 3-year deal worth roughly $45 million instead of what he's actually owed? I think they will and should be willing to do that. I don't know who it's going to be with, though. Like, it's one thing to do it with Arenado where you're eating $10 to $15 million per year to get it down to what you're talking about. It's another thing entirely to do it on Miles Michaelis' deal, which is $18 million. And if the Cardinals were willing to take on $8 million, maybe you do get a lottery ticket prospect in return, right? So it's a 1-year, $10 million deal for Miles Michaelis. I could see somebody being willing to take that on. $18 million, no chance, though. So I think they should be willing to do that, especially now that we know they have some certainty with their RSN deal. It sounds like they're in a better place financially as a result of that.
I think every single player that the Cardinals are looking to move on from, they should be calling other teams and saying, hey, are you interested in this player? And if so, what do you need for this to work? And if that's eating some salary on certain guys, if you're in this retool, should totally do it, especially for guys that are only going to be here for 1 or 2 years. Like Arenado's a special option in this one, but I still would look at it as, can I get something in return and just move off of the money?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that they will consider and should consider because of what we just talked about. You could eat some of that money. You feel like you're safe in terms of where you're at with your RSN situation, and it boosts in terms of what you're going to get in return. Like, if you trade Arenado at just his current deal, I don't think you're getting much in return. I think you probably get like a lottery prospect. I think if you eat some money, I'm not sure you get like a top 100 prospect across baseball. I would be shocked by that. But
I think the only guy that you can trade
like
this offseason that gets you a top 100 prospect is Helsley, and I'm not positive he is.
I think like if you can eat some money on Arenado, make it more manageable for teams, you're probably getting maybe one of their top 10 prospects in that deal. Like, and that would be a win for the Cardinals.
All right, last thing here, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Guys, what do you think that Saad being a fourth liner says about where the Blues value him and how they see him fitting into their future plans? I don't know that it's about that necessarily.
Yeah,
I think it's about his performance recently, but we've said all along, I think Brandon Saad's a trade chip for them at the deadline this year.
Yeah, if they had available players, I don't think Brandon Saad would be playing tonight. But you're not going to put Bolduc on the fourth line, although they have played him there. And frankly, I think he didn't have the greatest game against Washington, nor did Kapanen. So I think this is all about accountability, him being on the fourth line and not getting enough from him on both sides of the ice. But even before the season began, when the offseason moves took place, you looked at it and you're like, I don't know where Saad fits in long term. And even if this team's in a playoff spot, playoff race, or drafting in the top 5, I think Brandon Saad's a trade candidate because another team would look at that as, hey, this guy gives us a shot to win. And the Blues might have more guys developing that fit into a third-line role than what Brandon Saad would.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to get into some NFL quick hitters, including some criticism for the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll get into that. And, man, Mike Tomlin went after a former Steelers player in a way that was pretty direct. We'll tell you about that coming up in 15 minutes. But coming up next, there's one really creative scenario that the Cardinals could do this offseason, and I think it makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. All right, so we've talked a lot over the last couple of weeks. Hey, can the Cardinals get creative this offseason? Alex, I was listening to a podcast yesterday. It was the Starkville podcast on the Athletic Podcast Network. I think Jason Stark's one of the best baseball writers in the country. Maybe the best baseball writer in the country, for my money. And he had a bunch of beat writers on. One was from Philadelphia, another from New York, one from L.A. And they were talking about this offseason and what these respective teams should be doing. And the guy he had on from Philadelphia, the Phillies beat writer, said he expects the Phillies to be active this offseason, but there's not a ton that they can do because they're so locked into these contracts. There's not a lot of guys that they can move on from. So he said one way that they could try to switch things up, something that they feel they need to do, is by trading Alec Boehm. And then this morning, I read from Jeff Passan over on ESPN.com something similar where he said, hey, not sure that Alec Boehm's going to be available via trade, but if they want to do something that really improves the team, he's probably the chip that they would have to play. Alex, in theory, the Cardinals don't need Alec Boehm. He's a third baseman. Cardinals have a third baseman in Nolan Arenado. They have another guy that can play third base in Nolan Gorman. They have another guy that can play third base in Brendan Donovan. Oh, and one more that can play third base in Thomas Saggese.
That's a lot of third basemen.
So, in theory, this makes no sense for the Cardinals. Unless they get creative. Because there is a scenario where the Cardinals, either to Philadelphia in return for Alec Boehm, or elsewhere, Dodgers, New York, whatever, they trade Nolan Arenado in a separate deal potentially, or in this deal. The Phillies need a closer. They need to improve their bullpen.
We have one of those.
They highly value guys that throw hard. That's been Dombrowski's MO for 20 years. Get guys that have high velo.
Ryan Helsley typically throws three
big
digits.
Time stuff. At times, maybe they've got some issues with command.
Hey, that's him.
That's him.
Sounds like Ryan Helsley, right?
It's like playing
the Cardinals are in the midst of a reset, and they're looking for guys kind of similar to what the Blues are doing that are in that age range of, hey, could they be a future part of our core? 25 to 28 years old, be here for the next 5 to 7 years, right? That's Alec Boehm. He is in the penultimate year of his deal. He's got 1 year left on his contract. $8 million this year in arbitration is what they're projecting. So it'll be 8 years, $8 million this year, probably 12 next year. 2 years, $20 million is effectively what his contract is right now. Alex, this would be one of those areas where you could get creative to improve your lineup, improve your club, get younger, add potentially a guy that could be an all-star caliber third baseman in Alec Boehm. I don't know exactly what the package would be, but maybe something like Helsley plus maybe Lars Nootbaar, and you make Brendan Donovan an everyday left fielder for you. Now Gorman's at second, Boehm at third. They throw in a prospect in return for Newt plus Ryan Helsley. Is this the kind of thing that you would be interested in? Or is it a reach and you don't think it's even necessary for the Cardinals to continue adding to their core? How do you feel about this kind of a creative move that brings in some upside for the Cardinals in their lineup?
This is absolutely what the Cardinals should be pursuing. I mean, if you're trying to do this thing quick because you don't want to go into a rebuild, this is almost identical to what the Blues tried to accomplish with bringing in a Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway. Now, those guys were obviously younger, but you were bringing in players who had experience at the NHL level that filled a void for you. And I understand third base is not a void for you. You know what is? An impact bat in the middle of your lineup is the void for you because, frankly, Goldschmidt and Arenado were not that. You know what Boehm did last year with runners in scoring position? Because that's my stat that I go to now. That's my clutch meter.
Based on you bringing it up, it was good.
He had a 906 OPS, an OPS plus of 143. You know what he did with runners in scoring position with 2 outs? A 1,500 OPS. Like, this is a guy that is 28 years old that you put in the middle of your order and say, cool, here's our cornerstone. Is he a little too old? Probably. I would like somebody around like the 26-year-old range, but this is how you flip it quick. This is how you turn it around. You trade a piece in Ryan Helsley who doesn't fit your timeline. Closers typically don't if you're going through a 3 to 4 year span of trying to win. And Lars Nootbaar, it sucks to give up, but you got a lot of outfielders right now and you're really left-handed heavy. Alec Boehm comes in and immediately makes your team a lot more appealing than what it is right now. You've put the third base spot in. As you guys referenced, you put a Brendan Donovan in the outfield, so he's an everyday bat. You move a Nolan Gorman to second base to still rely on that power. but I have now locked in third base with a 28-year-old who for the next 7 years is going to be one of the faces of my team.
Yeah, I think this kind of move is something that the Cardinals should definitely explore because it is creative. And, I mean, you mentioned they don't really have a hole at third base. No, they got a hole at third base. Nolan Arenado is not the guy I want at third base for the St. Louis Cardinals. I would look to move his deal in a separate deal. You move Helsley, you move Newbar in this, you get Alec Bohm. Boom. In theory, you get him on a contract extension. Now you've got your next third baseman for the next 7 years that's younger than Arenado and is still productive offensively. And you now can move Brendan Donovan to the outfield. You've got Nolan Gorman or Thomas Ajacey that can play second base. I'm not only still in this youth movement, but I'm in the youth movement still. I've moved off of some big salary. Oh, and I've brought in a guy that can potentially be another pillar for the organization moving forward from an offensive standpoint. I think it makes all the sense in the world. And I'm basically, I've been saying this for the last, I feel like 2 years now. You've got Newbar and Brendan Donovan, a guy that's going to have a high on base, will hit for some average and have an okay pop. I don't think you need two guys like that. We've talked about their profile a lot when we look at the Cardinals lineup. I don't think you need two guys like that. I think you just need one. And you definitely need a right-handed bat to add to this core, in my opinion, because to me, they're too left-handed heavy. So, yeah, I would be absolutely in on going after an Alec Bohm. This is the offseason where you need to be getting creative if you're the St. Louis Cardinals.
And to be clear here, this isn't necessarily just an Alec Bohm conversation. I used him as the placeholder because he's the guy that is being bandied about among national analysts that could potentially be on the move this offseason, and he fits into the criteria that we're talking about. This is a former, like, legit high-level prospect who has come up to the big league level and had real success, like real legit success. His batted ball profile suggests, hey, this guy potentially could be an all-star for years to come. Or if not an all-star caliber at the third base position, a spot at which the Cardinals could maybe have an answer with Nolan Gorman or Brendan Donovan, one of their current, Thomas Ajacey, one of their current infielders. Maybe Thomas Ajacey just becomes Alec Bohm. That's potentially in his range of outcomes, but it's very much a theoretical. Alec Bohm is already Alec Bohm, man. And he's a big bopper in the middle of your order. Like if you had Brendan Donovan at the top of your order with Bohm, Contreras, Herrera as your 2, 3, 4, Burleson batting fifth, Wynn, Walker, Ciani, like that's a decent looking lineup right there. I don't know if it would be good, but it is certainly young, and you've got some guys in that lineup that I now can dream on what the upside is. So whether it is Alec Bohm or somebody in a similar position with another team, I would be curious to see if the Cardinals could use Ryan Helsley as that trade chip to a contender, like the Red Sox. They have a surplus of outfielders right now. I was watching MLB Network the other day. They've got like 5 of the top 15 prospects in Major League Baseball, and they're expecting most of them to reach the big league level next season. In the outfield, they already have a bunch of guys that are kind of established out there, so they're going to have to displace somebody. It reminds me of, you remember the Willy Adames situation with Tampa Bay, where they had Wander Franco coming up? They said, hey, we got to trade Willy Adames. Not because he's not a good player. We've seen he is a really good player, played well for the Brewers, and is going to get probably $125 million this offseason. But they traded him because they had Wander Franco coming through the system. Something similar could happen with the Red Sox this offseason. They could potentially use some bullpen help. Maybe they want some other surplus value that you have with your pitching as well. These are the kinds of moves that I would like the Cardinals to explore this offseason. You don't have to go to the market and get these stud free agents. That's not something that the Cardinals should be or will explore this offseason. But somebody that's maybe getting pushed out, yeah, I think it could really make some sense for the Cardinals. And Ryan Helsley might be the kind of chip that can get that accomplished for them.
Yeah, you're always trying to make this faster than what it's supposed to be when you're going through whatever you're going to call it, a refresh, a retool. You want to expedite this because, as we've heard a lot of people mention, Tom Stillman and Bill DeWitt III, nobody's got an appetite for a rebuild in St. Louis. So you know how you expedite it? You get super creative, and you bring in players, regardless of where they fit, you bring in players that, 1, create appeal for your roster, but 2, come in and answer a lot of the questions that you have. And the questions we have surrounding this team right now is, where's your offense coming from? Because you're relying on Mason Wynn, you're relying on Alec Burleson, you don't know if Wilson Contreras is going to stay healthy. Frankly, you don't know if Ivan Herrera is even going to be in the lineup. You're wondering where the answers on offense are going to come. And if Nolan Arenado was here, you're still asking the questions. You know, when you're not asking them, you go get an Alec Boehm. Or even if it's beyond it, you get creative and you go trade for a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and then you offset certain players. You bring in a staple to answer your questions, and then you let all of the complementary pieces develop around it. And I'm not saying Alec Boehm is Bryce Harper for your team, because frankly, he's not. But you know what he is?
He's like a solid third best player in your lineup.
But he's the
best player in your lineup.
He's a middle of the order bat that gives you time and the leeway to let the other complementary pieces develop in what you need, because you know he's already done it at the major league level for 4 years. You know that he's going to be there every single night for you.
You need to develop around him. This is we're getting a lot of blowback for the
Being
idea
creative.
that Alec Boehm is a
teacher,
really good player that's helpful, whatever.
Did you hear his RISP?
Guys, 2 years ago, the Phillies were in the World Series. Guess where Alec Boehm hit in their lineup? What would you guys guess? In the World Series.
I think he was high up because he was hot in that World Series. I want to say like 5th.
He's cleanup.
I was going to say.
Okay, I knew
He's
he was
batting
up in the lineup.
cleanup
third or
for
fourth.
the Philadelphia Phillies in the middle of their order. It was Schwarber, Turner, Harper, and Boehm. So, if he can bat cleanup for the Phillies in the World Series, isn't that the goal, is to get to the World Series? It shows you, and I'm not telling you he should bat cleanup for the Cardinals, but I feel like there's become this notion that you need Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, and Mookie Betts to be your top three, with Will Smith batting fourth. Otherwise, you shouldn't even field a team. Like, eventually, you've got to find a way to construct the best team that you can possible. And for the Cardinals next year, that's not going to be with a bunch of world beaters. It's not the Monstars, okay? You're going to have some just okay players out there that you're hoping that they can eventually become something more. And if they don't, guess what you do? You trade them. You move on from them. You decide, okay, we'll get the next guy in here. Hey, Alec Boehm didn't work out the way that we were hoping. Didn't quite end up reaching his potential. Well, if you're trading Ryan Helsley this offseason, your opportunity to get some kind of return is probably going to be option A, this Alec Boehm idea, or somebody similar, young player that's shown some propensity to have success at the major league level, bet on the upside. Option B, a prospect that's shown you nothing at the major league level that you hope becomes Alec Boehm or something similar. So, sure, I'm willing to take my shot with the former, see if it works out. And if it doesn't, in 2 years, you either, like next offseason, maybe you trade him. J.J. Weatherholt's ready to go. Cool. We'll move Gorman over. We'll play J.J. Weatherholt at third. Do whatever. Or you let him walk in free agency. You say, didn't quite work out the way that we were hoping, but got a couple of years of production at third base. Didn't have to worry about that. We move on. Say our goodbyes. There are a lot worse ways to go about this than to have somebody that is a legit answer at the age of 28 at third base. I don't think it's something the Cardinals will do, but I do hope that it is the kind of thing that they look into, whether it's Boehm, looking at the Red Sox. You brought up the Blue Jays. If they end up missing out on the free agents and decide to pivot there, I don't know what the Seattle Mariners are going to do this offseason, but maybe they have some pieces that they will be in play. The Cardinals should get creative, and they finally have somebody inside of that front office now that's going to have a pretty significant say that I think has the propensity to get creative given his experiences in Tampa Bay. I hope they do something similar this offseason here in St. Louis. Coming up next, time for some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926. Whether you have an old unit or whether you just bought a new one, you need a company that is going to make it last for you and your family. And that is Classic Air Care, because I've been using them since 2016. Worked on a 23-year-old unit that I had in our first house and a 21-year-old unit that we had in our current house. And that is what Classic Air Care does for us. Don't believe me, though. Believe the over 2,500 Google reviews. Classic Air Care with a 4.8 rating on Google reviews, like this one from Michelle. Nick is the greatest, punctual, professional, and organized. Everything was explained to me in great detail from the work that will be getting done to the exact price of my HVAC system being installed. After having an HVAC system of 30 plus years in my home, we'll be getting a brand new one thanks to Classic Air Care. They've got financing options for you. They've got a maintenance agreement that you could be a part of that puts you at the priority list when you have issues. Call Classic Air Care today. You can also schedule online with them at classicaircare.com. Just tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. That's Classic Air Care and classicaircare.com.
All right, it's time for some NFL quick hitters with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Jamie Langenbrunner is coming up in about 10 minutes, talking to him about what it was like to be really the veteran voice inside of the locker room for the Blues roughly a decade ago when they started to make their run in the early 2010s. We'll do that coming up in 10 minutes. But right now it's time for some NFL quick hitters. Alex, this is a quote from Mike Tomlin. Quote, "I haven't thought about facing Deontay Johnson this week." He continued, "He's not on a lot of their video. They have more significant pieces with larger roles to worry about at this point in my week." End quote.
Oh, boy, Mikey, you just lit a fire. You just lit a fire.
For those that don't remember, Deontay Johnson was a Steeler, and then he wanted out, so he became a Panther. And then he was traded to the Ravens for a bag of balls. And now that he's on the Ravens, he's basically done nothing for them so far.
Until this weekend.
What do you make of that comment, Alex?
I mean, look, Mike Tomlin, in my opinion, is one of the better coaches in the NFL, just in terms of consistency and always being there and understanding his players. If you get a guy that asks out of your team, it makes sense that you're going to kind of take shots at him. I just don't know if I'm going to take shots right before I play against the player. Now, he was probably asked the question, and so you answer it. And frankly, I like the honesty. Give me honesty over bookmarked answers, because those are annoying.
I love
But
it.
I also don't know if I would do it before you played them.
Oh, I would so do it before I played him. I want him to know that things aren't always better on the other side when he wanted out. He got traded to Carolina, and then he got traded to Baltimore. And if you're not going to perform with Baltimore, hey, man, I don't know what's up, but it's a you problem. So
That's true.
I love the fact that Mike Tomlin's just like, hey, man, I don't have to worry about him. He ain't done nothing with the Baltimore Ravens. Tell him the truth about what's going on.
All right, next thing up here as we go through some NFL quick hitters. Guys, the Rams,
We don't need to talk
Bucks.
about it.
Yeah, that was embarrassing.
the Rams, the Buccaneers, the Falcons, and the Bengals, they were all trendy picks to make a second half run. Do any of them still have that in them, in your opinion? Rams, Bucks, Falcons, Bengals. Do you see a future for any of those teams in the postseason this year?
In the postseason,
Yeah.
I could see
As like a real threat in
no,
the postseason?
absolutely not. I could see one of them getting in there, but I don't see them being a real threat. I don't even know if the Rams are going to make it now for how the NFC West is winning around them. And I could say the same thing about the Bucks, although the Bucks might. Really, it's the Bucks and Rams. And on the AFC side, I've made it pretty clear that I'm done with the Bengals.
Somebody's going to make it in between the Bucks and the Falcons. Somebody has to win that stupid-ass NFC South. But,
Whoa.
sorry.
That was aggressive.
Language.
Jeez, there's kids listening.
The Falcons, what was that? Really? Really?
Marcus Valdez-Scantling, man.
They fired their coach. The Saints they needed that more than the Falcons did.
You're right. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling had 110 yards and 2 touchdowns against
Nobody
them.
knew who's on that team.
I totally
happened?
forgot. I thought he was still on the Chiefs.
I did too.
I was just like Bills for a little while, and then he got released when they got Amari Cooper.
I just assumed the Chiefs didn't bring him out of their locker room until the postseason when he does something.
T-Bone, your team got anything in him?
I think so. I think they're the one on this list.
you being
that can make
serious?
it. Yeah, I am. I like
You
last
watched
night.
that game last night.
I did watch
against
that game
that
last
team.
night. Look, their problem was not their defense. And if that's the case, I think they're going to ultimately end up being fine. Now, it wasn't great that Sean McVay was like, that offensive line was not very good, and that was the first time it was healthy. I think the O-line will get things figured out. I think their offense, prior to that game, had started to click a little bit. Kyron Williams has been good all year. Cooper Kupp, Puka back, adds more weapons to that offense for Matthew Stafford, who can still sling it. And defensively, Jared Verse is causing all kinds of havoc, and he's getting to the quarterback. It's just a matter of the sacks aren't there yet. I think they're coming.
You want to play the game that you played with the Bengals, BK, of like Rams, yes or no?
I think the Rams are going to be the team
They're
that
gonna-
gets into the playoffs, and it wouldn't I wouldn't bet on it, but out of these four, they're the one I would circle as, hey, they've got the potential to go on a run.
I think
So
they're going to lose
wins that
4 more
potentially are on the
games.
schedule the rest of the way. New England,
Win.
New Orleans,
Win.
the Jets.
Loss.
Win.
All of these games that I've just mentioned are on the road, by the way, which is not great.
Oh, west to east.
You got a game against Seattle.
That's probably a win because I think Seattle will be
I
cooked by that
think
time.
the problem is, how many wins do we think it's going to take to get into the postseason this year in the NFC? This is why I'm still in on the Bengals. My team out of the ones that we just mentioned is Cincinnati. Because in the NFC, dude, you're going to have to get to 10, I think, to get into the postseason. So what's the path for the Rams? 6-2 the rest of the way? I don't think that's likely. So I think that is just too much to ask. I do not foresee the LA Rams being able to find a way to get into the postseason. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we're going to get into the junk drawer. But next, what is it like to be the veteran voice in a locker room for a team that is going through a bit of a retool? Jamie Langenbrunner has been that voice before here in St. Louis. He's going to talk to us about that next here on 101 ESPN.
I'm doing well. Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they take on the Boston Bruins. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. The Joey will join Chris Kerber for puck drop at 7. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline, which of course is presented to you each and every day on 101 ESPN by Callier and Thompson. To be joined by former NHL forward, former Blues forward, 18-year NHL career, now the assistant GM with the Boston Bruins. He is Jamie Langenbrunner joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Jamie, appreciate the time, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely happy to have you on. So we wanted to talk to you a bit because Doug Armstrong has mentioned a number of times how this season for him was kind of a repeat of what that 2011-2012 season was, bringing in some veterans to bring the team along. That was at the front end of the Blues where they really started to get back to their winning tradition. Jamie, what do you remember about what it was like to be one of those veteran voices that was brought into that locker room back in 2011?
Yeah, that message was consistent with Army right from the beginning of free agency, and talking with him. Obviously, had a bit of a history with him, having been with him in Dallas, and when he was in the assistant GM role there, and he knew a lot about what I was about as a player, and it was a fit that made sense for me, going to a place where a lot of young talent, and was learning to play the right way and play winning hockey, and felt it was a good spot to extend my career a little bit, and get back a little bit what I was given by so many good vets early in my career, and some of those little things in the game. The players were more talented than me, but having the ability to give some of those experiences and talk about what it takes to win, especially come the end of the year, and it was a great fit, and I was happy to be a part of that, and learned a lot from being around Army and Hitch at the end of my career. Different experience, and wanted to go forward.
Jamie, from a veteran's perspective, like you just mentioned, kind of on the back end of your career, and you come into a group that had 18 players that were 25 or younger, and Ryan Suter, a player who's turning 40 in January, is kind of living this right now with the Blues. Was that a difficult role to adapt in a locker room with a lot of younger guys, of stepping in as a free agent and trying to be a voice in that room?
Not really. That group there, Ocean Backs and Steiner to a degree, and Petro, and Torty, all the guys that were the young talent, and a big part of that core moving forward. They were all great human beings, first off, and I think when you have young kids that are wanting to learn and show respect to the older guys that have been through it, which all of those guys did, it was pretty easy. And I owe a lot to Bax and the way he kind of ran the ship as the captain, and asked for support from Scotty Nickel or myself or Arnie, and kind of teaching him what it meant to be a captain, and teaching him when to lean and when to maybe get off the pedal just a little bit, and just let things go. So it wasn't that difficult. I mean, maybe the coaching change right away was a little bit a little bit of a balance. I remember that phone call from Army giving me a heads up that Hitch was coming, which the man I had played for a number of years, so I knew what was coming with that. It also made it easy and kind of cushioning some of the way Hitch would go about things with the young guys, and explaining to them that his message at times can be wearing on you, but the message is good, and take that and move forward, and especially for a young player that's trying to find their way. And as a veteran guy, it was a lot easier to kind of
Jamie,
have those
whether
conversations with them.
apologies there, whether it was Dallas or New Jersey, you played for a lot of winning clubs prior to your tenure here in St. Louis. I'm curious, what in that year in St. Louis, what was it that allowed that team to get back on track? Because there had been a lot of losing seasons prior to that year, and then suddenly it was the beginning of really a decade of quality hockey here in St. Louis. So what came together for you guys in that season that was able to sustain the winning?
Well, I think first came the losing, which brought in a lot of talent. You had some high picks and some good players that we're talented and we're learning how to play winning hockey. And I think bringing Hitch in and the way he goes about the game, bringing in some of the veteran guys that were there. There was Arnie or Scotty or myself that have been through it. Getting those daily habits. You're not going to win every night, but you got to give yourself a chance every night. And I think that's something that was missing. That it's not going to be perfect, and that's all right. You got to fight your way through it. And we talked a lot about that, about the consistency every day, not just on game days, but practices having meaning, taking care of the puck in crucial areas. It doesn't need to be highlight play every time. And that's part of learning as a young player. And fortunately for us older guys going through it, we've been able to learn those lessons and kind of keep on pushing those on to some of those younger players.
And Jamie, I would imagine when you're trying to hammer that home with a lot of younger players, sometimes throughout a season it can feel like one step forward and two steps back, to where you see progress in a game, but then you lose that progress that you were trying to develop. From a locker room's perspective, is there something that needs to take place before everybody in that room can kind of be on the same page in terms of the commitment to the little things to start getting into that winning mindset?
Well, you do need positive results at some point. I mean, you can't keep on preaching and continue to lose, because that doesn't help. So, you need to get. I'm not going to say it's lucky, but you need to have some of those results happen that give you that feeling. But again, to me, it's just that consistency that, we played a good game last night, and then the next morning in practice doesn't mean we get to take the day off. We need to be sharp for whatever it is of that ice time and get ourselves ready for the next game, because it doesn't really matter. And that's how you build wins, and you win 4 out of 5 or 7 out of 10, whatever it may be that you need to do to give yourself a chance to make the playoffs in this league. And you got to be good. You got to win more than half your games, and it's not easy, because every night in this league is difficult. And I think that's the biggest hurdle for young guys is, both directions. Getting 2 down after a loss, moving forward from there. All right, it's a blip. Let's go ahead. And after a win of thinking, now we got to figure it out, because it can come back and get you real quick.
Jamie Langenbrunner is joining us here on 101 ESPN, former NHL forward, spent a year or two here in St. Louis as well. Jamie, I did want to ask a little bit of a follow-up question on that. You have a previous history on the development side of things in the NHL as well. So kind of tapping into that expertise that you have, how long, or maybe the better way to phrase this is, when do you know if a player is potentially at the end of his wits with an organization to quote unquote get it, right? Like you mentioned, eventually you got to have those positive results, and you've got to be able to kind of turn the page to doing those little things that give you a chance to win every single night. How do you know, as somebody that is in that position as an executive, if that's going to happen for a player, or if it's just not going to be able to happen for you at that time with that organization? How do you kind of view that?
Well, I think that's one of the million-dollar questions every organization goes through, and why you see guys when they get that second opportunity that something clicks for them. Every player is different. I think when I had my development hat on, I got to be the positive guy, see potential. Now kind of in the new role, I have to a little bit of a wider lens, but you're looking for growth in larger stretches. It's not an every game thing. Every game's not going to be perfect, but over a 20-game span or a 30-game span, you're seeing growth in their game, more consistency, being able to put more of their talents shown at the right times, making the right decisions. You're seeing some of the things you're preaching, some of the things that need to be there to be an everyday NHL player, and you're seeing growth there. When you stop seeing growth and it's still not good enough, that's when it's probably time to cut bait or move on. And I think that's where teams get to. And I think the beauty of our game is then there's another opportunity with the other team for some of these young guys that, for whatever reason, the message isn't heard or the opportunity just isn't there because someone that has very similar tool set is a spot in the lineup that they would need. There's certain jobs that only certain players are able to do, and not every team has all of them.
Jamie, final one for me. We appreciate you hopping on with us. For somebody who has been around a lot of younger players in terms of, American Hockey League guys or 23, 24-year-olds that get to the NHL, have you seen the trajectory for younger players change in terms of getting to the NHL and having success from when you played versus now?
A little bit. I think now the younger guys are given an opportunity probably higher in the lineup right away. When I was coming through, you were most likely to break through in the bottom of the lineup and then work your way up. There's a little bit of that. The league is younger in general. I think that has more to do with salary cap and salary cap stuff than anything else. But there's a difference. But at the end of the day, good players find their way, and they all do at different times. I mean, we have a guy in Boston by the name of Justin Brazeau who, started in the coast for us and, cracked the NHL at 26 and he's playing on the top line tonight for an opportunity. So you never know with guys, and that's what I talked about of some of the patience. And as long as you're seeing continual growth and not a stagnant thing, that that there can be opportunity at 19, 18, up to 26, 28. You just never know how some guys are going to develop and when it's all going to click for them.
Hey, Jamie, this has been great, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. We wish you all the best in your role as the assistant GM with the Boston Bruins. Great to be able to catch up with you here on St. Louis Radio once again. We'll talk with you again soon, my friend.
Sounds great. All the best, guys.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Jamie.
That's Jamie Langenbrunner joining us here on 101 ESPN. Appreciate his time today. Very busy man. Does a lot with the Boston Bruins, assistant GM there previously in player development with the Bruins. And, of course, spent a year here in St. Louis at the back end of his career, 2011, 2012. Big season for him. Blues, of course, get about 13 games into the year. David Payne ends up getting fired. Mm-hmm. They bring in Ken Hitchcock. They go on this crazy run the rest of the way, end up being at the front end of what was a sustained run of success for the St. Louis Blues. And that's the year that Army has brought up a number of times as to what he's hoping the season can be, the catalyst for a sustained stretch of successful hockey here in St. Louis. Alex, what was your biggest takeaway from our conversation with Jamie?
I think it's what he was talking about of when that winning clicks for a group of guys, because the difference with that team and then this team is, yes, you had 18 guys that were 25 or younger, but a lot of them had been playing since 2009, and they were basically... They were figuring out their warts at the NHL level, and that's where the Blues were still at the bottom. They drafted Alex Pietrangelo 4th overall. But when he mentioned at some point you have to feel like there's progress in how you're playing. Like sometimes you're going to lose. But if you play the consistent brand of hockey that is supposed to be winning hockey, you see the benefits. And if you go back and look at that season, the first 13 games before Davis Payne was fired, you'd win one, you'd lose one. You'd win two, you lose two. And they were like 5-4 wins and then 3-2 losses and differences that way. And then once Ken Hitchcock steps in, you take what a group was trying to figure out in terms of on the ice, and you just instill a little bit of confidence of, you're playing it right, let's switch these things up so that you start to see the results. And I don't know if the Blues are in the 2010-2011 stretch season to where they were just bad, but you were hoping there's progress, or at some point it clicks and you look at 2011, 2012 and say, hey, we're doing the right things, but we just need to stick to this brand of hockey of consistency. And him mentioning practice, doing the exact same things that you're doing in games, those are elements that winning teams figure out pretty quickly.
So I'm going through some of these to your point on them being young, but not necessarily inexperienced. I think that's a really important distinction for the Blues. And back on that team, Backes was 27, but he was in year 6. Oshie was 25, year 4 in the NHL. Now, Petro was 22 years old, and he was in year 2, second full season in the league. That would be probably, most similar to like Broberg, for example, in terms of his experience level and age. Kevin Shattenkirk was 23. That was his second full season in the NHL.
They just traded for him, too, from Colorado.
David Perron at that point in time was 23, but he had 5 full seasons in the NHL. Patrick Berglund, 23 years old. It was his 4th full season in the NHL. So we're talking about guys that had been in the league for a long time at that point and had gone through all of the warts of those 4 years, really, of experience together. And really, at least the last 2 years, that's one thing that it's almost hard to come up with a comparison for what the Blues are currently going through. Because you look at the next wave of talent that's about to come up, and it's probably more similarly going to resemble like the Tarasenko and Schwartz, like that group that ended up coming up after Backes and Oshie and Petro and Perron. The group that you currently have that's comparing to these guys is probably more the Thomas and Kyrou and
that's what I was going to
Booch.
reference. And
it's that group. And so it's not a total 1-for-1 because those guys don't maybe it's unfair. Those guys don't feel as young as those guys.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think the Oshie and Backes are the two I want to hone in on because, as Jamie mentioned there, like credit to Backes, who was a captain that already was established himself in that locker room, but it was taking the steps forward. And it's tough now because he's injured, but I think the Backes and Oshie role is what Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou are right now.
Yep.
Those are the guys, Kyrou's
it's not a coincidence that they ended up trading one of those guys.
Kyrou's in his 5th full season with the Blues, 6th overall season in the NHL, and then Robert Thomas is playing in his 7th season. So, like, those guys are similar to what Backes and Oshie were when you got into that winning mindset, when you were saying, like, okay, we've got the core pieces, because I love the Petro and Broberg result there, because that's the defenseman you're looking at, and you're like, okay, we build around this guy. We just drafted him. In this sense, you just traded for him.
Petro completely changed the outlook for the organization.
But you had some of the pillars in place, and you were like, okay, now it's time to take what you've learned, the lumps that you've had to suffer through these last few years, i.e. the last 2 for the Blues, and put it into workshopping right now. And the question's just going to be, and that's why I found Jamie Langenbrunner so fascinating, the question is going to be, is this the season that it finally clicks and say, hey, we've got to start focusing on every element of our game so that we can take that step forward?
He's Alex, that's T-Bone on BK. If you missed any of our conversation, check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. That app is presented by the Schaefer Door Company. The podcast page are all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Coming up in 10 minutes, we're getting back to college football. There's going to be some one-loss teams that are under the microscope tonight when we look into the college football playoff rankings reveal. How are those going to go down? Teams like Miami, SMU in particular, what is this going to mean for them? We'll talk about that in about 10 minutes or so, but the junk drawer is coming up next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. If you were super famous, Alex,
If I were,
do you think you would be the type that would love the attention that comes along with that? Or that you would almost try to retreat from said attention?
I think I would retreat. And it's not so much on my purposes. I think it would be on my family's purposes. Like, try and stay out of it so you don't put your family at the risk of where they're going to be followed all the time. Because the more you embrace it, the more you're in it, then your family's in it. And that would be a tough thing to handle.
I would definitely shrink. I want a personal life, that doesn't feel like it's being invaded. Because there's nothing better than, doing your own thing, doing your work job and talking with the people at work. Or like in our case, maybe sometimes you run into a fan that listens to the show. But like when I get home, I just want to be at home. I want to be away from it. I'm still like kind of locked into what we need to do. But like I don't want anything else outside of that to invade my privacy.
The reason I ask is because GQ's cover story this month is with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And the whole premise of the story is he's trying to fade into the background a little bit when he's at home. So he has this place in Virginia where he's got a bunch of land and there's just nobody around him, right? Because anywhere that The Rock goes, this dude can't hide.
No.
He's enormous. Like, he's one of the most famous individuals in the world.
And he's enormous.
Exactly. You put those two things together, like, good luck. He walks into any grocery store or like restaurant in America, certainly, and probably basically the world, the guy's going to get recognized, right? So he's trying to find a place where, like, I can just kind of go be myself, right? What does that even mean to be yourself when you're The Rock and you've been playing a character for 30 years now? So it's a really interesting story. Highly recommend checking it out. But it's kind of, it's another reminder. I remember we talked about this a little while ago with Chappell Roan, who got super famous. She's a singer from Springfield, put out an album like 4 years ago, and it just caught fire within the last year. And then she got involved like politically and stuff, and there's a bunch of backlash, and she just, how can you be ready for it? But she just very much was not ready for all of the attention that was about to come her way. She's from a small town in Missouri and then just gets super famous like overnight, 4 years after she put out this album. So I don't know how I would react to that, dude.
Yeah.
I don't think well. I really do not think well, especially if I was young. Like, now maybe it's a little different. Alex, when you have a kid, like, you're a little more grounded and it changes you in certain ways. I remember when I started doing this, dude, I read every comment. People will tell you they don't. I read everything. If you posted something about me on social media, there was almost a 100% chance I probably read it.
Yeah, and it would get me down too. Like,
Absolutely.
it would crush me for probably 24 to 48 hours.
Now imagine, like, I love what we do, and I'm not trying to put down what we do. This is crappy fame compared to, like, a superstar on the Hollywood scale, right? Or a super famous musician, something like that. They've got millions of followers. We've got thousands.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very different scale. I can't even imagine how you react to something like that.
Well, and just to The Rock's comp in this one, I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's got 2 little girls, and so like that's the part where it's like I don't think it would just be me getting reserved, but I would get super protective of my family.
100%.
And when there's starting to be negative comments about your family, that's where you go into hiding, because it's like, if you're putting yourself in this position, you're ready for it. Like, The Rock's ready for it no matter what, because he's been doing this from pro wrestling on. But when you put your 4-year-old daughter or your 6-year-old daughter of your dad's a failure or this is embarrassing, blah, 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 they're not mentally ready for that. And then now you're getting into protective mode. It's what we talk about Mo so much here. But what you forget about with John Mosaic is like his kids dealing with all of that stuff. And so
they go to school.
Yes.
I remember Matt Nagy used to talk about that after he got fired from the Bears, right? His kids would go to school and they'd be hearing about it at school, and that's where it gets a little like, really?
Yeah, it's like don't start putting the kids
natural.
in that spot.
I mean, like, what? This is the life that we've all signed up for, right? For better or for worse. It's something that I've thought a lot about with us doing something that is so public. Like, I have no idea what that's like for Luca. I certainly didn't experience that growing up. My dad, growing up, worked in computer sales. My mom's an accountant. Like, that's a little different than a parent working in a very public-facing format like sports radio. Yeah. So it's just something that you think about. And whenever I see this, again, scaling-wise, very different. I'm not comparing myself or us to what The Rock has, but whenever I read stories about people that get into fame and how it changes them or how they interact with that, it's always interesting to me. So I was curious what you guys think it would be like if you got to that level. All right, with Alex and T-Bone on BK, it's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. In about 15 minutes, we're going to play a game of Bet It or Forget It. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on BK and Ferrario. But coming up next, speaking of betting it or forgetting it, are you guys betting on the one-loss teams in the ACC moving up in the standing or in the rankings this week in the college football playoff rankings revealed tonight? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. All right, so where are we going to see some of these one-loss teams come in tonight's college football playoff rankings reveal? With Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex, we all know, for the most part, like top 5 teams in some order: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana. Throw in Tennessee in there. Boom, there's your top 6. We know that. But beyond that, I am really curious to see how the committee deals with, like, Alabama, for example. How far do they go up after a big win last week? What do you see from Ole Miss? Same thing. Do they go ahead? I would imagine they go ahead of Georgia now, considering they just beat them head-to-head. But how much higher? Who do they prefer between Alabama and Ole Miss at this point in the season? Where does Georgia fall to? And maybe most importantly, what do they do with the one-loss teams in the ACC? Miami, 1 loss, just happened. How far do they drop because of that 1 loss? Are they still in contention right now to effectively control their own destiny? If they went out the rest of the way, do they end up in the college football playoff in that final reveal? What about SMU? What happens with them? Where do they put a team like Army, which is still undefeated, guys? 9-0 on the season at this point, undefeated. So there are some really important, the top 6 or so, I don't really care all that much where they end up going because that'll kind of get itself figured out. The middle of the pack, that like 8 to 20 range, that's where you're really going to learn some stuff tonight in the reveal.
And that's where, like, just the SEC, I think, is going to where that's dictated because of what you mentioned with Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. Like me personally, I would be putting Ole Miss ahead of Alabama. Because Ole Miss, yes, they've got 2 losses just like Alabama does, but you just beat around Georgia. And I think a couple of weeks ago, and I know Georgia's had an awful season, but a couple of weeks
Alabama
ago,
did the same thing, though.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, people were looking at this as Georgia was still a playoff contending team. And I mean, Ole Miss essentially comes in and then knocks them down and say, nope, you're not even a playoff team right now. So I would look, it starts with those 3 SEC teams because of the Miami loss, because you've got SMU, and then you've got a lot of other teams like Colorado. I don't feel like people are talking enough about Colorado to where potentially they sneak into the playoffs right now. You've got Clemson. You mentioned Army undefeated. You're at a spot to where because 2 of those 3 SEC teams have been okay, but it hasn't been anything that's like earth-shattering, I really wonder if a couple of teams jump over those SEC teams.
I think Alabama has a better resume than Ole Miss. Like, if I would just put the 2 in front of me and I didn't know who the teams were, blind resume. Alabama has big wins this year over Georgia, Missouri, LSU. I know it doesn't feel like Missouri's a big win. They're a top 25 win, no matter how you slice it. That's still a key win for them on their resume right now, right? They also went on the road and beat the hell out of Wisconsin, which is a decent team, not great, but decent for a non-con win. Their 2 losses this year came on the road against Vandy in a really close game, and then on the road at Tennessee, a top 10 team right now in the country. Meanwhile, Ole Miss, best win of the season so far, last week against Georgia. Mm-hmm. Second best win, probably at South Carolina, in terms of the second best win on the resume. So they don't meet the criteria that Alabama does in terms of their best wins. Their worst losses, at home against Kentucky, is the worst loss of either of those 2 teams, no doubt about it. And then at LSU is pretty similar to the loss that Alabama has at Tennessee. So I just think the better resume right now, if I was going 1 for 1, would be Alabama out of those 2 teams. And then you add in Georgia into the mix as well. Well, Georgia lost to both of those teams, so I cannot have them ahead of Alabama or Ole Miss right now. So I think if you're like stacking those 3 teams up, it's Bama, Ole Miss, Georgia for me. Do you guys think they belong ahead, all 3 of those teams, despite having 2 losses, ahead of the likes of Miami, Boise State, SMU?
I don't. I think
because those 3 teams have 1 loss on their resume, but the quality of the victories are not as good.
Yeah, but I feel like the big wins Georgia hasn't come away with compared to, and again, I understand they're not even big compared to what Georgia's played against, but I think if you look overall in their season, Miami and Boise State have been more impressive this year than Georgia.
I mean, Georgia has a win against Texas, though.
Yeah, but
which is
on the road, by the way, and a win against Clemson.
That's up there with the best wins of anybody in the country. The best win on Miami's resume so far is Louisville, probably.
Yeah. I think Miami drops out tonight. I think what you will see is those 2-loss SEC teams. I think the way you rank them is how I would have them in some fashion in the top 12.
I would have Boise ahead of Miami.
I would too. I think
their
Boise
one
State
loss is against Oregon, who's the best team in the country.
Yeah,
right now.
and they don't have a big win, but I think Boise
Neither does
State.
Miami.
That's my point. But Boise State, like, they're going to be at 12 because they are the Group of 5 team. Like, that's probably the only reason they actually will rank ahead of Miami. But to your point, like, to me, Miami falls way down.
Can I
and
go a step
SMU
further?
leapfrogs them.
That's what I was about to say.
Because SMU's one loss this season is to BYU, which you look at now and you go, that's a pretty good loss to have on your resume because BYU's undefeated and is number 9 in the country. SMU should leapfrog Miami tonight.
Bingo. They should be ahead of Miami because they have Pittsburgh, Louisville, both as wins. Their one loss was against BYU, and that's not a bad loss. Miami has now a bad loss on their resume, and they have the same quality win against Louisville, and their second best win does not live up to, maybe it would be Florida, I guess, would be their second best win on the season. That's not a great one. If that's your second best win, I can't put you ahead of SMU. I would have Miami right now behind Boise and SMU, all three of those SEC teams that we just discussed. Would you have them ahead or behind Texas A&M? Texas A&M's resume this year, their biggest loss was against South Carolina. Just happened. They also lost against Notre Dame, who's now a top 10 team in the country. They have wins against Mizzou and LSU, which is better than any win that Miami has on its resume right now. But it's a 2-loss team versus a 1-loss team, and one of Texas A&M's losses is against South Carolina, which is not at the same quality of what we were talking about with some of these other teams. So would you have Miami ahead of them? Is that where you stop the drop?
I think they will fall past A&M.
Wow.
But I think what the committee has shown,
unless they win the ACC.
They're not done. They still got a path. It's kind of like Mizzou's, though, or in what you just said, they do win the ACC. But yeah, I think so. Like, it's hard to look at the ACC. It's hard to look even at the Big 12 as, hey, if you have a 1-loss team, sorry, but they got to win your conference. I think that's the only path. I think those conferences only have one team that's going in. I mean, especially the ACC. That conference is not very deep. And even their quote-unquote best teams are like Clemson, who's like arguably a top 25 team in the country. Meanwhile, I look at the SEC and I can go, man, that conference is like 6-7 deep. Miami to me falls past A&M, and it's because they don't have the big win. You know, I think that's what the committee's looking at. I mean, we brought this up when we were, I don't know if shock's the right word, but we're a little surprised by how high Notre Dame was with the loss to Northern Illinois on their schedule. Yeah. Look, you can have a bad loss on your resume. Do you have the big wins to go with it? And that's why Miami doesn't have that. Well, A&M does, and that's why I think they will fall. I think the other thing with these rankings, and it's going to be interesting to see where they place these teams, Miami, LSU, Missouri, Clemson, Colorado, like where are these teams going to kind of fall in place here at the bottom of these rankings? I'm fascinated to see where Missouri ends up because though they did win this week with their backup quarterback, it wasn't a big win if you're looking at a resume builder. You know, Oklahoma's not a good football team.
It's not going to drop them.
It's not going to drop them, but like how far up do they go in these rankings is where I'm curious, especially like when you look at like an LSU team.
Why would you have Colorado ranked ahead of Mizzou right now? I know that sounds crazy, but look at their respective resumes, and are we sure that they should be ahead of Missouri? They lost on the road at Nebraska 28-10. They lost at home against Kansas State 31-28. Their best win on the season is what? Texas Tech?
Probably.
UCF? Like, they don't really have a single win of much quality at all.
I think
same number of losses. They didn't get blown out. They also didn't play the same quality of teams, though. If I did put them on a neutral site or on the road, as Missouri did, against the likes of Texas A&M or Alabama, if you get blown out like that on the road against Nebraska, shouldn't I expect something similar would happen to Colorado?
In theory, yeah, but I think that's the one thing.
That's it, huh?
And when you compare those two teams, fair or not, I mean, the SEC is definitely deeper than what Colorado's played in the Big 12. When you compare those two teams, neither one has the big win. And then it comes down to, okay, what'd you do in your big matchups? And they lost by 3. Meanwhile, Mizzou got killed in both of theirs. And
Kansas State, I think, needs to be ahead of Mizzou.
And if that's the case, then Colorado will be ahead of Mizzou because that's who they lost to by 3.
Sure. And I guess that's it. That'll be the thing. Like, because K-State's... And then the reason why I would have K-State ahead of them is because of win against Colorado, win against Tulane. Those are 2 quality victories. Your losses were a blowout on the road at BYU, but you've got the quality of victory, and then you lost against Houston. I think that they'll be like back-to-back to me. What do you do with LSU versus Mizzou's resumes? That's where I think it gets really tough. 3 losses for LSU, but wins against South Carolina and Ole Miss, and the losses aren't as big as the loss that Missouri had. On the road, you had the USC opener, and then the last 2 weeks against A&M and Alabama. So you have the same 2 losses as Mizzou did, but not quite by the same margin, and then you add in 1 more.
I think LSU's ahead of them.
Yeah.
I think so too.
And
That's a bummer, man.
Is that Alabama one, even though they lost, like you didn't lose as bad like Mizzou did, is that what just moves it above Mizzou just a little bit?
I think it's the win against Ole Miss that moves them above Mizzou a little bit.
Because it's a top 25 win.
If you took
100%.
out that Ole Miss win and like replace that with, say it was Vandy, like say they beat Vandy at home, Mizzou's ahead of them because the USC loss looks bad. Now you've got two comparable losses to Missouri, but you don't have the big win, and you've got the third loss.
Bingo.
And I think what we've seen is the committee's looking at those big wins, and if that's the case, LSU's ahead of them, which means, by the way, makes me wonder if there's still a path for LSU as a 3-loss team to the playoff.
It'd be tough, but
I
it's
agree.
possible, I think.
It probably requires what we talked about yesterday, where Notre Dame ends up losing somewhere along the line and falls out.
I think it would also require them to get into the SEC championship game, and there's so many different things that would have to happen for that to take place. I think they would have to get in as a SEC champion potentially, or at least get to the champ. Yeah, if you get to it and you lose, you're done. I think they would have to win the SEC championship. I think that's Mizzou's path as well, by the way. I know on the morning show, Tia May, they had a full chart of what has to happen.
They're over here. They're huge.
And then they just let there on the recycling bin.
Yeah, well, that's nice. At least they're recycling.
That's the tough part. All right, last one here. South Carolina versus Mizzou. Who has the better resume? Let me read you off South Carolina's resume real quick, and we'll get to better to forget it on the other side. South Carolina has losses against LSU and Ole Miss and Alabama. Now, 2 of those 3 are close losses. They lost to LSU by 3. They lost against Alabama by 2. And that was on the road at Alabama. Their wins this year, quality wins, are at Kentucky, which makes it more... I put a bump if you go on the road and win a game like that. At Oklahoma, won convincingly. Home against Texas A&M, and on the road against Alabama. Or excuse me, on the road against Vanderbilt. That team should be ranked ahead of Mizzou, right? We agree?
Mm-hmm. You said
better
they beat
resume.
who at home? Who was that? Top
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M.
I think that team has to be ranked ahead
But
of
the
Mizzou.
convincing win over Oklahoma and the win over Vanderbilt.
Those are Mizzou's best wins. And they added on top of that Texas A&M head-to-head.
And you lost by 2 points to Alabama. Where the Mizzou was, 43-0, 41-0?
Somebody on the text line, reason why I went through this, somebody on the text line asked 314-399-9646 Comfort Service text line, where does Mizzou come in? I think around 22, 23. Somewhere around there. That early 20s, I think that's probably where you fall because I don't think there's really much of a scenario where you pass South Carolina, Kansas State, LSU. Maybe Louisville, maybe you pass them. Maybe they don't really like what they've seen from Washington State because of the lack of quality victories on their resume. I could see that, but I don't think much higher. I think it's really hard to make a case for Mizzou to be above 21 or so. Yeah, it's hard. All right, coming up next, better to forget it here on BK and Ferrario. All right, boys, better to forget it. Roki Sasaki will sign with the St. Louis Cardinals. Baseball America put together their pitches for every team in Major League Baseball because this isn't about money. This is about where does he want to go.
Oh, we're doing the sales pitch now, okay?
Yeah, this is similar to when Shohei Ohtani came over a year prior to him being able to be like truly posted for a free agency bid, the way that last year Yamamoto was, or last year as well. What's his face? Pitcher for the
Yamamoto.
Cubs.
Oh, Imanaga.
Imanaga, thank you. Shota Imanaga. That's going to be the opposite of what this is. This is basically, hey, where do you want to play? And then you'll go through your rookie deal. Beyond that, then he'll get his real money. Their pitch for the Cardinals, quote, "We've been a National League powerhouse for more than a century, but we admit that we've taken a step back. We're rapidly working to fix that, and there's no better way to show that we're younger, more talented, and better than by adding you," end quote. No. Alex, better to forget it. The Cardinals will sign Roki Sasaki.
Forget it. No mention of the Arch, or the brewery, or the zoo, or toasted ravioli. You're just going off of we were a powerhouse for a century, and that's about it?
Apparently.
Yeah, I'm going to forget it. I don't know if there really is a selling point for the Cardinals with this one, but if I were to pick one,
We have Nupar.
We got Lars Nupar. It's a Japanese sensation right now.
I think there's a decent pitch. I don't think that they're not getting it.
No, he has a decent
He's going
pitch.
to
Surely it's
LA
not-
or San Diego.
Surely it's not leading with, we were a powerhouse, because you haven't been that for
We've
years.
taken a step back over these last couple of years.
I mean, part of it has to be the history of the franchise.
Yes.
Like that has to be a selling point. Hey, you want to play in front of 40,000 fans a night? Well, give it about a year or two, and you'll be back in front of them.
Ugh, I don't like this sales pitch already.
Come create your own legacy. Don't join Yu Darvish. Don't join Shohei Ohtani. They're going to be the stars on their team. You can come be the single most important player for a historical franchise in the Midwest and come build us back into what we were. Look at what Albert Pujols became. Look at what Yadier Molina became. Look at what Bob Gibson became. Look at what Ozzie Smith became. They're titans of the industry. These are guys that are viewed historically among the all-time greats at their respective positions. You can do that here in St. Louis, and you just got to give us a chance. If you go out to L.A., you're just another one of the stars. If you go out to San Diego, you're not Fernando Tatis Jr. You're never going to be Fernando Tatis Jr. You're not Manny Machado. You're not going to be the face of that franchise. You going to be the face of the franchise? Come here to St. Louis. You can be that here.
This is great. How much money are you offering me?
There's no terms that are going to be different no matter where he goes. The money will not be different. The money cannot determine the outcome of where he goes because there's no. This is like if J.J. Weatherholt gets back to Major League Baseball or whenever he gets up to Major League Baseball, they all get the same deals, man.
Yeah. He gets like a rookie deal.
It's determined by Major League Baseball.
Forget it.
Forget it for me as well.
That was a nice sales.
It was a really good
to
try.
LA or San Diego. I just do think the Cardinals have a real pitch here. It's not going to matter because of the geography of it. Like if they were on the coast, I think they'd have a better shot. But if you put the Cardinals in San Francisco, I think they'd have a chance.
Maybe meet like by the Mississippi River. See, look, water.
No,
Yeah, so it
not the
looks a little
Mississippi.
different.
That's not the same kind of water.
Take them to Table Rock.
Yeah, you don't want to go to the Mississippi and say, hey, go enjoy this. Come out with some type of disease.
Alex, what do you got?
Guys, better to forget it. We will see one of Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin finish their career on another team.
Forget it.
They're so bad right now.
And everybody knew it.
Minus 21. It's probably because Kevin Hayes is on IR, the savior that is. They're 14 points, which, by the way, the Blues also sitting at 14 points. There's 2 points that separate them between a playoff spot and also the top pick in the NHL draft. Yeah. And the NHL has not started off very well in the around the league, but one of those two guys plays elsewhere.
Forget it.
I still say forget it. I think Pittsburgh has fallen victim to what the Cardinals did with Adam Wainwright, Yadier Molina, Albert Pujols, go down the list of players, falling into the legacy player, which
The captain's going down with the ship.
in some way, I'm glad to see something like that, but it's probably not the best way to run an organization. And I think you're right. I think Sid the Kid is going down with the ship along with Malkin.
I'm actually going to bet this one. I really wonder if Crosby wants one more shot at a Stanley Cup before he calls it a career, because he's done after this contract.
It's interesting because I was going to say Malkin was the one that I think is more likely to be traded.
I think Crosby's so.
I think there's a chance
you
that
can't trade Sid.
I think there's a chance that both would like to be traded. That both would. I mean, because Malkin's going to be 40, Crosby's going to be 40 when they're done. They've got favorable contracts in terms of another team taking them on. And if they want a shot at the cup, because you're right, this has nothing to do with Pittsburgh and everything to do with those two. You got to wonder that their legacy's already set in Pittsburgh. They're going to want to try and win a cup, and I could see Sidney Crosby being like, "Send me to Colorado."
I just think it's different. I think it's different if you spend your entire career somewhere. And I know, T-Bone, you're 100% correct. Like, from the organization's perspective, you have to look out for the well-being of the organization. But from a legacy perspective, Sidney Crosby's always going to have a lasting legacy in Pittsburgh, no doubt. But I do think it changes a bit. There's a little change to the legacy if you end up going elsewhere.
I kind of look at it as the Joe Thornton effect. Like, Joe Thornton he's played for a couple of different teams, but like his legacy is the San Jose Sharks, to where he was traded and he spent basically his entire career. But those last 2 seasons, he wanted a shot at winning a Stanley Cup. And now he's a free agent, so they didn't trade him, but they basically said, hey, go, because we want you to go win a Stanley Cup. And he went to Florida and Toronto. Now, it didn't work.
He also spent the first 7 years of his career in Boston.
Right, but that was out of his control to where he was traded. Like San Jose, he opted to stay there twice through free agency.
Once you go to a different team, I think it changes things. Sid has never played for anybody but Pittsburgh. His entire NHL career has been with one organization, playing in front of one fan base. I do think that changes things. It is so incredibly rare to be able to say that in today's day and age. How many players have played more in the last 20 years, have played more games for one organization than Sidney Crosby has for the Penguins? I can't imagine it's many. So I'll say forget it because of that reason. I think he wants to continue that tie. T-Bone?
Guys, bet it or forget it. The 7 teams that currently hold a playoff spot in the NFC are the 7 teams that we will see in the NFC playoffs this year. That is the Lions, Eagles, Falcons, Cardinals as your 4 division winners right now. Vikings, Commanders, Packers as your wild card teams.
Forget it because I think San Francisco's getting in.
Who's the team that falls out?
One of the teams from the...
Let's see if we're on the same page here.
Man, I can't believe I'm saying that. I mean, I think it's either the Cardinals. Cardinals could absolutely fall out, or Minnesota.
That's who I thought would fall out. Minnesota. Sam Darnold now, I think...
His play has really slipped, man. Like, seriously slipped.
I think he leads the NFL in interceptions among quarterbacks that are healthy right now.
So here's the remaining schedule for Minnesota, and this would go against my stance. Tennessee, Chicago twice, Atlanta, Seattle, and then Green Bay and Detroit the last 2 weeks of the season. That Detroit game, though, might not matter for Detroit. Yeah. So they'll probably get in. I'll say they get in over Arizona. But I think San Francisco will get in, so I'm forgetting it either way.
Did you say Tampa in your list?
No, they're not in right now.
I
think Tampa gets in. If you look at Tampa's schedule the rest of the way, I'm probably looking at 5 more wins. Here's the Falcons. Broncos, not really sure. Chargers, probably not. Vikings, maybe. Raiders win. Giants win. Commanders, who knows? Panthers, no. Our Panthers, yes. I think Tampa might be able to get in. They play, I think, twice against the Panthers down the stretch. So I'll say forget it. I think Tampa gets in over Atlanta.
I'm forgetting it. It's because I think the Vikings are the ones that fall out. And I think San Fran ends up whether winning the division and then pushes the Cardinals to the wild card, or San Fran just gets a wild card spot. Minnesota's team I'm circling as, sure, their schedule might be easy. Guys, they nearly lost to Mac Jones and the Jaguars this week. That was an ugly performance, and Sam Darnold looks like Sam Darnold again. So forget this.
By the way, to answer my question earlier, I looked this up. Now, this is from Wiki, so I can't promise you that it's 100% accurate.
It's always accurate on Wiki.
That's what I used throughout my college career.
Sidney Crosby has spent 20 seasons with the Pittsburgh Penguins so far. Alex, there have only, according to Wikipedia, been 5 players in NHL history that spent more seasons with one organization than what Sidney Crosby has with the Penguins. The most recent one was
Ovechkin.
Shane Doan. They're tied.
Oh, okay.
Shane Doan is the most recent one with Winnipeg/Phoenix/Arizona, the Coyotes.
And I bet you Ryan Getzlaf's one of them.
He is not. Yzerman
really?
with the Red Wings is another. He had 22 years with the Red Wings.
What's the guy that's a hat trick where you get a fight assist?
Gordie Howe.
Gordie Howe. Surely he's up there, right?
So this is all messed up. Disqualified from the list because they spent their career with the original franchise for at least 12 years, but were somehow disqualified from the list. Gordie Howe is on that list.
That's why I don't use Wiki, folks.
Getzlaf just retired 3 years shy. Played 17 all with Anaheim.
Oh, because Gordie Howe played for Hartford in 1979, the Whalers. He was 51.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Man
Can't recall that.
The man just kept playing.
He was in the Hockey Hall of Fame for 7 years and then played for the Hartford Whalers.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that's why he was
Hockey man.
disqualified from the list. So he should have been on there, Timo.
Hockey man.
Dang it, Gordie Howe.
All right, so that's what we've got for Bet It or Forget It.
I feel like we accomplished a lot there.
I feel like I learned a little more about Gordie Howe.
Yeah. I think I did remember he played for Hartford. I did not know he was in the Hall of Fame already while doing so.
Yeah. For 7 years, Martin Brodeur, also a guy that was disqualified because he played for the Blues for a year.
Stinking Blues.
Again, not his choice. The Devils just basically said, "See you later, man," and didn't bring him back.
Yeah. So that's another one of those. But yeah, it's. I think this is the kind of list that would mean something. Like he could have the same number of seasons with Pittsburgh that Stevie Yzerman had with the Detroit Red Wings. There's a special connection there, and I find that hard to deny.
If I'm him, I want one more shot at it, though. And I don't know if I'm willing to suffer through 2 more years of this. One more shot at the cup. You've won 3.
There, man.
You're right. If you were to put a percentage on one or the other, Malkin would be the one to go before Crosby. But if I'm Crosby, I want one more shot at a cup. And I think the Penguins should do right by Crosby and say, like, hey, man, let's send you somewhere where you win a cup.
You let him. Yeah. But I think he resigned for a reason. I think it's because he wants to stick with him. All right, he's Alex Estebon on BK. Coming up next, the recent history of teams that lost this bad, this often, at this point in the season. It ain't great. We'll tell you about it, how it relates to the St. Louis Blues next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendricks, Near Day Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Boston Bruins. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Carver for Puck Drop at 7. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, what did you just say?
So Robert Murray is on foul territory, and he was saying that could Rocky Sasaki end up with the Milwaukee Brewers, and he speculates how that could be possible. Did I say it wrong?
Yeah,
I said Rocky.
I kind of like your version.
I said Rocky.
I think it's Rocky, but I like Rocky.
It is Rocky.
Are you going to play the Rocky theme song when he comes in running into Bush? That'd be awesome.
It says could Rocky, and I just put the C right there with Rocky. My mind didn't work there. But yeah, he speculates of how he could end up with the Milwaukee Brewers. Friend of the show, Robert Murray.
I will say this.
If they have a sales pitch,
The sales pitch was the same as BK's. Hey, you could cement your own legacy with Milwaukee.
We have beer and cheese and the Packers.
We've got beer.
And cheese.
Toasted wraps.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have Provel cheese.
And we
Better
have
weather.
We have the Battle Hawks.
Got an
And better
MLS
weather,
team.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we get better weather.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, in the summer, I'm not sure that's totally true. But
in the winter
don't worry
it's
about that.
It's ultimate frozen.
You know what? Now that you say that, we're not going to have Sonny Gray in on this meeting.
But Roki comes in and he's like, yeah, but look, Sonny Gray gets to come out after 5 innings when the humidity kicks up.
Well, that's the other thing. You can play with stars here in St. Louis. You can't do that up in Milwaukee because they all leave.
That's true. Well, we're
Look,
getting...
we
all
keep
leave
our
here,
stars
too.
here.
We're
No,
actively-
that star
trade
has a
them.
bad back.
No,
Like, come on.
we trade our stars
We're
here.
actively trying to get rid of ours.
Those are the over-the-hill guys. The guys that actually are stars that perform the way that they were supposed to, they stick around for
Like
20 years and
Helsley?
then they get a $17 million parting gift. All right, Alex,
Randy A?
when you think about
Marcelo
the way
Zuna.
that the Blues have played in recent weeks, they have now lost multiple games by 7 goals.
Yeah, that's a thing.
That's a really hard thing to do.
No, it's not. I bet there's a lot of people that
It's an
do
extremely rare thing to do. Matt DeFranks wrote about this earlier today over in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. In the last decade, the only team to lose multiple games by 7 goals or more in the first half of the season. This year's Blues, last year's Sharks, and last year's Blackhawks.
Oh, my God.
It's not a good list to be on.
Those are number 1 picks there, T-Bone.
Yeah.
Macklin Celebrini.
Pretty wild that it's happened 3 times in the last 2 years and not once in the previous 8, but I digress. Alex, if you expand that, multiple games, 7+ goal losses in the first 60 games of the season. So basically prior to the deadline.
This feels like
Over
a
the
cherry
last
pick stat.
20 years, here are the teams that have done it. The 2005 Capitals. They finished with the number 4 overall pick, drafted Nicholas Backstrom, worked out all right for him. The 2005 Maple Leafs, they finished with the number 13 overall pick. I don't mention who they picked because it didn't matter. The 2008 Oilers, they finished with the number 10 overall pick. Same story as the Maple Leafs. 2010 Hurricanes, they finished with the number 12 overall pick. 2010 Lightning, conference finals, 103 points that season. And then last year's Lightning, strangely, are on this list as well. Finished with 98 points, first round loss. So if you're not the Lightning,
I'd
the
like to
moral
hone in
of
on the
this
Lightning.
story, you're finishing with the top 12 pick. Alex, is that kind of how you feel about the Blues right now?
Yeah, it is. I'd like to hone in on the Lightning, but those Lightnings had guys like Kucherov and Stamkos and Point and Hedman and Vasilevsky. And look, I'm the biggest Blues honk there is, but I can't accept that comp. It's the trend right now is you're a bottom 10 team in the National Hockey League. I mean, if you just go off of goal differential, here are the teams that are worse than you: Philadelphia, Nashville, San Jose, Pittsburgh, Montreal. Like, those are the teams that I think if you asked any expert analyst coming into the season would be picking in the top 5 in the National Hockey League draft, and you're right there with them. I think injuries pushed them into this a little bit, but those trends don't sit well for anybody. But if you're the Blues, and because you have these injuries, you don't want to be in this position, but might benefit you. I brought up the LA Kings last week in terms of like, hey, they were in that retool, and you know what finally got them out of it? Picking 2nd overall to get Quentin Byfield. And you're talking about all of those teams that were more in a rebuild where they were bad for a long stretch of time and picking higher. I don't know how this season is going to turn out. Maybe they turn this thing on when players start to return from injuries and you get a little bit more simple brand of hockey. But as I'm watching them right now with 2 7-goal losses in 6 days or 6 games, it's not trending in the direction of this team is going to rise above the expectations that are put in front of them.
I think this is good for the Blues. I really do. Long term, not that they're losing. Like, I get it. You'd rather win than lose. But I think it's good that they're not going to be pushed to try to do something that's not probably very rational. I don't think this team was ever going to compete for, like, a real run in the postseason. And honestly, I'm not totally sure this team was ever going to meaningfully compete for the postseason. Now that we can also kind of see that, and we've seen it really smacked in our face with it, I think it makes us all take a step back, reevaluate where we're at. All right, so we've got Broberg out for a while, Thomas out for a while. The team's probably not quite up to snuff to be a playoff contender this year. Maybe it is probably for the best for everybody involved to look as we get closer to the trade deadline at, maybe it's time to sell some assets, right? Hey, Brandon Saad, let's see what's out there for you. Nobody wants to hear this, and I'm not sure they do it, but if there's a market for Sonny, maybe you get a mid-round pick for Sonny. Fox, the same thing. Some of your pending UFAs, maybe that's the time to make some of those kinds of moves. Hey, Texier, is there a market for you anywhere else? Can we get a 5th-round pick for you? Those are the kinds of things that you could potentially do at this year's deadline. If you were contending, you're not doing any of that. You're instead buying. So you're spending assets instead of accumulating them. And those assets don't all have to be draft picks that you end up selecting with. They could be then used in the offseason to do what you did this past year, which is continue to add. Go get your next Matthew Joseph. Go get your next Alexander Texier. Or continue to give opportunities internally to Bolduc and Dvorsky and some of the other young guys that are going to be coming up. I think down the road, we will look back at this and say, it's not good that they lost multiple games by 7 goals. That's never great. It's not good that they gave up. But it can be good for us as fans of the team, as viewers of the team, because it gave us a better understanding of who they are, and we got smacked in the face with it early on, so we didn't continue to pretend as if it was going to be something different.
Yeah.
That would be, if I'm doing the glass half full, it sounds kind of empty, but that would be my glass half full perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, now to do the other side of the fence, I'll give you the optimistic side before BK just PP's all over in the Cheerios with this one. Like, you get to evaluate what your team is like without your best players, and when you get your best players back, where are you? Like, if you go into a hole in the month of December, so far, you're right. You're going to be looking at this, and Armstrong even said this in training camp. We're going to address accordingly depending on where our team looks at the trade deadline, and Assad might not even make sense if you've got a Snugger and a Dvorsky that are already there. The schedule does at least give you a chance to keep your head above water. Now, this requires you completely altering what we just saw in 2 games between the Senators and the Washington Capitals, but you play a lot of Eastern Conference teams between now and the end of December. And end of December is when you're expected to hopefully get Broberg and Robert Thomas back. You have 9 games against the Eastern Conference from January until the end of the season. That means you got a whole lot Western Conference on your schedule, to where that's 4-point swings, an awful lot for you to put yourself in a playoff position. It's really going to come down to what this next 6-week stretch looks like, because you put yourself in too deep of a hole, that's when you start selling assets off immediately and say, nope, this is just not going to be our year.
Blues back in action tonight against the Bruins. Pregame with Alex starts at 6 o'clock with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Coming up next, time for the BK and Ferrario Rewind. We got to get Alex, because yesterday I heard the Fast Lane was complaining about getting in 2 minutes late. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, if you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
You also can always watch us on YouTube, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. The studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. All right, Alex, before we get to the Blues, I want to get to them here in just a little bit. We did talk earlier today about the Cardinals, a creative potential option for them in the offseason. Alec Boehm, he's just been bandied about among some of the national insiders, including the Phillies beat writer, saying, hey, if they're going to make some real changes here, the only real trade chip that they have to offer is Alec Boehm. Alex, do you think that the Cardinals, maybe this is my best way to ask this. Do you have more hope of the Cardinals making a creative offseason move than you have in the past because of Chaim Bloom's presence? Because I think in the past, we would just outright dismiss the potential of them doing something like this. It's not Mo's way. He sees what they need, he checks the box, and he goes on to the next thing. And I'm not saying that's inherently bad. It's just not, this is not the way that he typically went about business. Chaim Bloom was with Tampa where they did the thing with Willie Adames. They traded him out when they had Wander Franco coming up. Do you think that he could potentially help them get a little more creative this offseason?
I do. I mean, because you know me, I'm typically I just shoot it down immediately, and it makes BK pre-mad because I don't expect the Cardinals to do anything. But now that Chaim Bloom's there, I would at least give it at least a consideration. Now, I still think Mo's going to have the final decision in this final year being in charge, and Chaim Bloom can give his advice, but Mo's going to make that decision, and we know how Mo operates. But at least there's some optimism that if Chaim Bloom's there and he says, look, this is the picture that I think could work, and here's the creativity in front of us, I'll at least offer the idea that maybe the Cardinals could pull that off.
Yeah, I think the odds of them doing it have increased because Chaim Bloom's there. I mean, look, Chaim Bloom's kind of helped them change their philosophy on pitching. They signed a minor league kid today who's got filthy stuff. Don't look at his ERA. You know, that's things they didn't used to do. They were always looking for the sinker ball. They had the nice ERA, plays their defense. So some of their philosophies have changed since Bloom was brought in. I kind of agree, though, with Alex to where I think it's probably increase in chance of it. I don't know if you see it being pulled off until you see Mo completely out of the picture.
I think you guys are right. I think you're right. I don't expect,
we can end it right there.
I don't expect them to do anything like this. I hope they do.
I do, too.
I hope they do. And it's not necessarily just Alec Boehm's a placeholder. Just do something creative. Hey, trade Nolan Arenado and then bring in somebody that, because you have Brendan Donovan who can play all over the diamond, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one specific area that you can add a player to your core. Just like the Blues this past offseason, they weren't anticipating getting a top 4 defenseman. It fell into their lap. They got a top 9 forward as well. You like where you're at. All right. Alex, for tonight, what's the number one thing you're looking for from the Blues?
The first period. 7 straight games where you've given up the first goal. If you're going to stand up in front of the media and say it was an embarrassing effort and we need to be better, it starts from puck drop. I'd like to see this Blues team come out fast, now with Matthew Joseph back, and get the first goal.
He's Alex Ferrario. He'll be on the pregame show starting at 6 o'clock. I'll be in attendance with Alex Ferrario in the press box tonight for the Blues versus the Bruins. Puck drop for that one at 7 o'clock. It's going to be a wild game.
Weird stuff going on.
So be sure to listen to that right here on 101 ESPN. We'll break it all down for you tomorrow. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard off of Chippewa, a St. Louis tradition since 1929. 95 years, 4 generations of family serving St. Louisans that famous frozen custard, and it's got the rich, creamy texture, perfected recipe that has been going around for 95 years. Whatever flavors you're looking for, they can put them together for you, or just go get some of their specialty. A Blues game tonight, go get the Blue Note custard. Vanilla custard mixed with blend of fresh blueberries, smooth lemon cream, cream and graham crackers. You can get it as concrete or a sundae, or you can buy it in the quart and bring it home with you, freeze it, and have it for all of your holiday get-togethers. While you're out there, speaking of holidays, get some Christmas shopping done. Walk across the parking lot, check out their gift shop where you can buy Ted Drew's souvenirs, Ted Drew's apparel. You can get Ted Drew's gift cards. All of those, the perfect gift for that special someone. So get on out there today. Start those family traditions that I remember when I was 8 years old. It's Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. It really is good, guys and gals.